This video is a fucking time capsule. As of now, I am filming this in January 2025, and you will probably be seeing this in January of 2026. And essentially what this is I decided to rate and review every single movie and show that I watched for the first time in 2025 as a big long-form review, and then I'm going to rate my year as a whole. I'm obviously not going to record all this in one go, so I am going to do it by every 5 movie and shows. So I will be dressed differently throughout this video. And also I'm going to keep my reviews very brief because it's going to be a long ass video as is, so it's not going to be, the same length as my normal reviews are. Also, I'm going to aim to see 2 movies in theaters every month so that there's a good amount of things that came out this year to contribute to the score. And lastly, I don't think anybody's actually going to watch this video from start to finish. I mean, if you do, that's great and thanks. But for all the other people out there, I'm going to have these 10-second title cards in between each movie with a timestamp that skips to the end of the review where I simply rate it and then contribute it to the overall score, meaning there's not going to be any spoilers for that thing. Just my rating of it, which is going to be spoiled with the overall score anyway. That way you can choose to see only what you have seen and to avoid spoilers for anything that you haven't seen. So without further ado, let's take it to the first movie I saw for the first time this year. So right off the bat, I realized that this format is gonna fuck me. I took so many notes for this movie, and I have so many jokes that I wrote for this movie that are never gonna see the light of day. There's a version of this review that's like 20 minutes long, and I had to just cut it down, which sucks, but it is what it is. I didn't want to start 2025 with this movie. I tried to watch it in 2024 because I know this movie is praised, and so I expected it to be good, despite the fact that it was made by Blumhouse. And I didn't want to start the year off with a movie that I knew was good. I would have much preferred to start the year off with a movie that I knew nothing about, so that way the score is kind of up in the air. But I was busy, and here we are. So this movie is about this drummer who strives to be one of the greats. And in striving to be one of the greats, he pushes himself to the absolute limit and sacrifices his social life and a lot of other things along the way. And pretty early on, and by pretty early on I mean in the very first fucking scene, we meet an angry Mr. Clean. His name's Fletcher.
Then why the fuck didn't you say so? I've carried your fat ass for too long, Metz. I'm not gonna have you cost us a competition because your mind's on a fucking Happy Meal instead of on pitch. Jackson, congratulations, you're 4th chair. Metz, why are you still sitting there? Get the fuck out!
I don't think we're supposed to like this guy. So our protagonist is named Andrew, and Andrew's life consists of playing the drums, bleeding because he's playing the drums so much, playing the drums some more, and then getting slapped around by Jeff Bezos. Just another day in the life of a band kid. So this is just the movie. He plays the drums, he gets abused, he plays the drums even harder, and he gets abused. And eventually, he gets pushed to the limit of abuse that he tattles. So Fletcher loses his job, but Andrew finds him out in the wild, and they share this exchange.
I was there to push people beyond what's expected of them. Otherwise, we're depriving the world of the next Louis Armstrong, the next Charlie Parker. So imagine if Jones had just said, well, that's okay, Charlie. That was all right. Good job. And Charlie thinks to himself, well, shit, I did do a pretty good job. End of story. No bird. There are no 2 words in the English language more harmful than good job.
But is there a line?
Physical assault. That's where I draw the line, personally.
Maybe you go too far and you discourage the next Charlie Parker from ever becoming Charlie Parker.
No, man, no. Because the next Charlie Parker would never be discouraged.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure negative reinforcement to that degree would prevent the greats. Now, I don't think you should give anybody golden child syndrome and say, wow, that was great, you're a natural, you're pretty good at this. But psychologically speaking, I think to encourage the greats in the making, you need to express some sort of positivity towards their improvement. You can't just keep saying, that's not good enough. That would probably turn a lot of people away, even the greats. Regardless of whether or not Fletcher's wrong about this, this sort of perspective on his character does humanize him and makes him almost likable. And the climax of this movie is fantastic, phenomenal. It had me jumping in my seat. Like, actually, it is truly a work of art. I give it an 8 out of 10. So we're starting the year off on an 8 out of 10. And I expected no less from how hyped up this movie is. This one I saw in theaters, so I couldn't take notes. And yes, I paused the movie at home to take notes. Bite me. Anyway, this one's gonna be easy to keep brief on account of that. I want to preface this by saying that I don't read. Don't know how. So all I know about the book is the movie. There were a lot of moments in the movie where I was like, wow, this is cool. This is spooky. This is sad. Which is a good thing. And there were a lot of subplots in this movie that caught my interest. But overall, this movie suffered from being pretty fucking boring. I'd say this movie is 60% boring, which I guess would appeal to readers. But even still, I did enjoy the movie. Especially that last shot. Not so much the moments leading up to that last shot. That was gnarly as fuck. But that last shot was beautiful. This one goes out to the feminists. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. Which brings our year score down to a 7 out of 10. So for shows like I've been doing thus far, I'm going to rate each episode on a scale from 1 to 10 and calculate the average. But a couple exclaimers before we get to this show specifically. I don't typically watch anime. I don't really like the animation style. I don't like the exaggerated elements that come with it being an anime. So I'm going to be forming a rather uneducated opinion on this show. In that same vein, this is my introduction to Junji Ito, because I don't even read mangas. That's how much I don't know how to read. So my opinion of this anime is going to be super uneducated, and I just want everybody to know that going in. The only reason I'm watching this show is because Dead by Daylight collaborated with Junji Ito, and I have made it my life's mission to be familiar with every license that Dead by Daylight rakes in. And I know this show gets a lot of shit from Junji Ito fans because the animation's cheap. I think that's it. I think that's the only reason. But again, this is my first time experiencing these stories, so I'm probably going to be a bit more generous. Episode 1 is about a self-absorbed loser named Soichi, and he is so trickster. And I don't know if it's an anime thing, or a Junji Ito thing, or a manga thing, or a specifically this anime thing, but a lot of times throughout the show, characters will say their thoughts out loud for the audience's sake, and that kind of ticked me off. Anyway, Soichi is just like this loser that like curses people, and that's it really. And he tried to scare this kid by walking on stilts, but he got caught into a bear trap, which led to this scene.
I found you! You're the kid ruining my trees! Pretending to be a cat won't help you!
Then the big brother blackmails the trap guy, the trapper, by threatening to get the police involved for setting traps on his property. That's a bit odd to me. Anyway, the last bit is like there's this girl that turns into a doll. It's like a separate story. Usually these episodes have 2 stories, but this was kind of shoehorned in here at like the last 3 minutes, and it was alright. Overall, I give this episode a 5 out of 10. Episode 2, the first story in this one involves a supermodel that is hideous and scary. Some film students cast her in a film where she cannibalizes the lead girl, and I'm not doing the justice by explaining this because it's kind of a slow burn. It's like built up. She has like this creepy vibe to her throughout the episode until it happens, but I don't have the time to break it down. And the second story is about a guy who has long dreams. He goes to sleep and he dreams for a week, that turns into years, that turns into 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, and he's basically living a long-ass time every time he goes to sleep. I think both stories are very interesting, but I feel like they were too short. I feel like these ideas could have been fleshed out a little bit longer. I don't know if it's because the mangas were short or if because of time constraints with the anime, but I think these would have been a lot better fleshed out. Still, I give it an 8 out of 10. Episode 3, the first story is about Crossroads fortune telling. Some schoolgirls go to the crossroads where it's all foggy and this creepy guy comes out and they're all like, "Will my love be realized?" And he's like, "No." And then they kill themselves. And that's most of it. This box cutter scene though fucking rocks.
Listen, I should have told you before. There's a good reason why I've been avoiding nudity lately.
And then the second story is about a girl whose tongue becomes a slug and then her head becomes a snail. And that's kind of spooky. I'd say it's another 8 out of 10. Episode 4. So sometime after watching this episode, before recording this, I actually had a nightmare about this episode. So that just goes to show how powerful this episode is. It's about this weird green thing that gives people this Swiss cheese disease where essentially they get holes throughout their bodies and then those holes, they like breathe through them and it's gross and disgusting. And to make matters worse, then bugs attack them, go through the holes and crawl around in their insides. And holy shit, this has disturbed me. And that's good. I mean, horror is supposed to disturb, and I had never have been so disturbed by a 10-minute short. The second story is about two brothers, kids, who are puppeteers, and then one of them runs away, and then the one that stayed gets an invite years later to his brother's house, and when he gets to his brother's house, he finds out that he's a puppet, and his family are puppets. And it's not terribly scary at first because they're willingly puppets. Like, they're all like, "Oh, no, I don't got to do anything for myself." But then one of the puppeteers go rogue, and then one of the puppets, like, kill a bunch of people, and it's pretty solid. I give this episode a 9 out of 10. Episode 5.
Don't hurt me or do anything terrible!
Fair boundary. We learn that this guy's house is a doorway to other dimensions, alternate realities. He brings a chick back to the crib, where she vanishes. He learns his alternate reality self is injecting these victims with a serum that turns them into icky flesh monsters because he wants to be taller. The next story is another Suichi story. He turns his teachers into these like ragdoll scarecrow people, and the teacher's pet decides to investigate Suichi.
But what if you're killed in the process? I refuse to die.
Fair boundary. It's just some more silly Suichi antics, but to be honest, it started to grow on me. I give this episode a 6 out of 10. Episode 6. So the first story in this episode is about a family that moves into a house and their neighbor only has one window. Their son gets the room that directly looks into that window, and at night there's this creepy ass lady that keeps like talking to him, and she looks ugly, and it's fucking scary. It's good. And I read the manga after watching this episode, and yes, it looks better. But I feel that the anime is still better for one key difference, and that's sound. Hearing the lady's voice it adds a layer that the manga just can't reproduce. I think the story is just much more scarier because of sound, and I think I'm gonna die on that hill. The second story is about a family that creates ghosts, or as they call after images, which are like non-sentient ghosts, every time a loved one dies. The big twist is that our protagonist is an after image, and alright. And the twist doesn't even make a lot of sense given what we know about after images, unless what we know about after images is supposed to be unreliable information, but who cares? It was a mid-story. I give the overall episode 7 out of 10. Episode 7. This lady kills her friend over a record, and then she plays the record. She's like obsessed with this record. And it turns out that this record was recorded after the artist died. So like it was recorded from beyond the grave. So after somebody hears the record, they become obsessed. It's a pretty cool concept. It's a pretty mid execution. And also listen to this. That shit has no effect on me. I don't know what these people are tripping about. The second story begins with some Freddy Krueger shit that is completely irrelevant to the rest of the story. What's relevant is our protagonist's family spies on her while she sleeps, and that is really creepy. So she goes to live with her aunt, But when she gets to the town, it's indoors. The whole town is an indoor town. And once she gets to her aunt's house, her knockers are out. She explains that the town has no privacy at all, and everybody just comes and goes as they pleases, and that roads go through houses, and that people spy on people. Then we see some eyeball monsters, and then the protagonist runs into the serial killer from the first part, but then the aunt saves her, and I think this story just suffers from a lot of, like, nonsensical bullshit. Like, this story is trying to be, like, 3 different stories. I think the concept is really cool, and I wish, like, it was just more focused. I give the episode a 6 out of 10. Episode 8. So this girl has amnesia and her boyfriend's trying to help her regain her memories. She goes over, her boyfriend's dad is a total freak. In fact, he's so freakish that his head is a caterpillar. That caterpillar consists of the heads of every generation before him. After that reveal, there's nothing else interesting about this story. The second story is about a circus where everybody performing stunts dies, the twist being that the ringmaster is death himself, and I think that's pretty neat. I give the episode a 6 out of 10. Episode 9. Our protagonist is a painter who meets Tomie, who is a well-known Junji Ito character. He paints her and she's all like, that doesn't even come close to my beauty. Then some other stuff happens, but eventually the painter gets to paint her again, and he paints this. Shortly after that he chops her up, but then all of her parts become other Tomie's, so she kind of like Deadpool's back, but like into multiple of her. The next episode is about this couple that are lost in the woods, and they find this guy living alone in a small town. He tells them that his old girlfriend died, and that she like sprouted this blood bubble tree from her neck. Pretty gross. Then the boyfriend discovers his room of blood bubble trees sprouted from the corpses of the villagers. They tell him that once you get blood bubbles, you gotta drink your own blood bubbles, but then you basically become a vampire, and that this dude is farming them for blood bubbles. It's a pretty gross episode, but episode is a 6 out of 10. Episode 10. So our protagonist, this girl, lives in a grease house. Grease is everywhere. It's just a bunch of grease. And her brother drinks vegetable oil and has acne. And then there's a scene where he pusses all over her face. And my God, it's disgusting. Not a scary disgusting. It's just disgusting. It's just vile. I didn't want to see that ever. So I'm docking points for that. She also learns that her dad is force feeding her vegetable oil while she sleeps. And that was weird. And then her dad becomes Oil Man, and that's it. The second story is about this girl that goes to see her grandma, only to learn that she's haunted by ghosts. Well, she's not haunted by ghosts. The bridge next door is haunted by ghosts, but they keep calling out to her. We learned the town had this weird ritual that when somebody died, they would float their bodies down the river, and if they hit the wall and fall into the river, they're stuck there forever. And if they float on, they go to heaven. So the ghosts of this bridge are all the people that fell into the river, including her ex-boyfriend, and they're all trying to get her to join her at the bridge. And then she's all like, I'm gonna die soon. Please don't let me go into the river. Please don't let me go into the river. I just want to be buried like a normal person. I don't want to be stuck at the bridge forever. And if the story ended here, I would like it. I think it'd be a really cool story. However, this bitch lets the ghost kidnap her grandma, and then she gets hit on the wall of the bridge, and she starts falling into the river. And I don't know about you guys, but if this was my grandma and she just begged me not to let her go into the river forever, I would swim in there and grab her corpse and give her a proper burial. But this bitch let her grandma sink to the bottom of the river and be forever stuck at the fucking bridge of ghosts. She is not winning Granddaughter of the Year award. For her incompetence and just the vile pus balls in the previous story, this episode is a 5 out of 10. Episode 11. So the first story is really boring. It's just about this foreign exchange student who has powers and makes all these weird things and then say like, look what I found, it's a weird thing. And it sucks, it's boring. The second story, however, is a bit more interesting. Basically, this girl dies and her dad puts up this scarecrow, and then the scarecrow assumes her likeness and essentially like is her. And then all the other mourning people put scarecrows on their graves and they assume their likenesses. And it's a really spooky wooky story, although this scene is pretty laughable.
He's looking right at you.
It's your eyes playing tricks. It's time we get rid of this monstrosity!
No! Put him down!
Let it go!
I get it now. You murdered our Shigeru, didn't you?
Overall, I liked it, but it doesn't make up for the first one. The 5 out of 10. Episode 12. As I was watching this show, I actually got into the mangas a little bit, and I actually read this manga before watching this episode because I was unaware that it was part of the show. So I was able to form an opinion from the manga perspective. Anyway, this story is about a group of people that discover this honey that's really fucking good. So good that they become junkies. The problem is, there's a good chance that eating this honey causes you to get splat. Literally flattened. The police start calling them the pancake murders. And so these junkies are all like, well, I gotta stop eating the honey because I don't want to be fucking pancaked. However, the honey is so good that they can't eat anything else because it all tastes bad. And eventually the last remaining junkie runs out of the honey and goes to the source of the honey, which is this weird gross tree thing. The whole story is an allegory for mosquitoes. You know how like mosquitoes like our blood, but then like if they drink our blood, we smack them and they go splat and they get pancaked. And I agree that the manga is better. The sound doesn't really assist the story in any way, unlike the window one. And I think the lack of animation actually allows this story more freedom imaginatively. For example, when we come across the tree in the anime, it just looks kind of silly. In my head, I imagined it a lot scarier. The way it moves it is. I mean, the manga has an illustration. And I think actually seeing the tree's branch come out of the sky instead of just seeing like the outline followed by the pancake splat is also worse. So I agree that the manga is better than the anime in this one, but only ever so slightly. I wouldn't be up in arms about it, but also I can understand that as a fan you would want it to be significantly better, or else, why adapt it? I can stand by you guys with that one. The last episode ends on our boy Soichi, just some silly Soichi stuff. Nothing really interesting. But then the supermodel lady that cannibalized that one girl shows up at the end and tries to eat Soichi, and she better not have. It ends on a cliffhanger, but you leave Soichi alone. I give it a 6 out of 10. Overall, I thought the show was good. It was decent. And my ignorant self has been converted to a Junji Ito fan. In fact, if I find time in my insanely busy life, I might even pick up the mangas. After calculating the averages, we got this show at a 6 out of 10, which brings our overall score to a 6.7 out of 10, and we'll round up or down once we're done with the year. So this movie is about an orphan boy named Cody whose dreams come to life. He's basically like a reverse Freddy Krueger. So what starts out as when he goes to sleep, the parents see all these beautiful butterflies in the house and they're like, wow, beautiful butterflies in the house. Quickly becomes a terrible nightmare when he dreams about the Canker Man, which is this cheesy looking horror villain. So to avoid nightmares about the Canker Man and bringing him into reality, he drinks soda, coffee, and takes caffeine pills. Literally me. And as we learn, the Canker Man ate his mom. I'd probably be scared of him too. So the foster mom has a selfish bitch moment where she uses the kid's dreams to see her dead son. But if she didn't have a selfish bitch moment, there wouldn't be a character arc. So, it's excusable. I want to just say that I think the mom and dad both are too, chill about the situation. This kid's dreams come to life, and they're not like, how? They're not like, what the hell? They're just like, oh, that's neat. Anyway, the Canker Man ends up eating the dad, and then the mom loses the child to Child Protective Services. She goes on the obligatory investigative sequence in every fucking horror movie in existence, and she learns about Cody's backstory. The way the mom defeats the Canker Man is by showing the Canker Man this stuffed butterfly, and then hugging him. And then the Canker Man becomes Cody, and then disappears. And we'll come back to this. She rescues Cody from the evil Child Protective Services, and then tells him a little bit about his mom. And we learn the origin of the Canker Man. So Canker was young Cody's mispronunciation of cancer, and his mom had cancer, and then she ended up looking like the Canker Man, which is kind of hilarious. And so the Canker Man ate his mom, his cancer ate his mom, and so he was, he had nightmares about his mom's cancer, but he didn't understand it, so it became the Canker Man. And the stuffed butterfly was a gift from her. So cheesy look aside, I think the Canker Man is actually a pretty clever monster, and it might just be because I'm stupid or something, but I didn't see that shit coming. I think it was pretty cool. It was a pretty clever twist, I think. However, the way she defeats the Canker Man is still stupid. I think there's a million better ways that could have gone down, and that brings me to my biggest gripe with this movie. It is so corny. All over the place corn. This movie is a fucking cornfield. However, I still enjoyed it. A lot, actually. 8 out of 10. This brings the year score back up to a solid 7 out of 10. Moving on. So this movie is about Dr. Leo Marvin, a psychiatrist that's a little self-absorbed who takes on a patient, Bob, who is a wacky lunatic that has zero boundaries. So Leo goes on vacation with his family, and then Bob shows up out of the blue. And this whole movie is Leo being upset because Bob, his crazy patient, is intruding on his vacation. And family's like, come on, Dad, come on, Leo, Bob is fun, we love Bob. And he's all like, grrr, I hate Bob. And that's the whole movie. That's the whole fucking movie. And for a comedy, it has its moments. I mean, I laughed a handful of times. However, it has a lot of problems. To start, I don't know who the protagonist is. I don't know who I'm supposed to be rooting for, because Dr. Marvin is supposed to be portrayed as like this asshole, but Bob is like truly annoying. And the family taking Bob's side is irrational most of the time. And regardless who the protagonist is supposed to be, it doesn't matter because neither of them have any character growth. You can argue Bob grows out of his phobias, but that happens early Act 2, and that's not even his character flaw. His character flaw is that he is intrusive, he has no boundaries or respect for privacy, and that doesn't change in the slightest. And Dr. Marvin doesn't become any less of an asshole. In fact, he becomes a bigger asshole and tries to kill Bob. So yeah, I mean, the writing in this movie is just atrocious. So I give this movie a 4 out of 10, which brings our overall score down to a 6.4 out of 10. And you thought we were done with Junji Ito animes. So the last anime was way too long, and that's because since it's a horror anthology show and it has like 2 stories per episode, that's 24 stories that I had to review. Unfortunately, to counteract that length and not do that again, I'm gonna need to be incredibly brief, so So the first episode is about this knockoff Addams family, and it's not scary or funny, it's just sad and boring. I give it a 3 out of 10. Episode 2, the first story is about this mysterious tunnel that absorbs people, and that's pretty spooky. The second story is about an ice cream bus that turns children into ice cream, and that's pretty spooky. But both stories seem kind of rushed, so I give it a 7 out of 10. Episode 3, this is about balloons that look like people's heads, and they have nooses attached to them. They try to hang the people they look like, and if you attack the balloon, whatever you do to them happens to you. I give this episode an 8 out of 10. Episode 4, we're back with our boy Suichi. Suichi bothers his brother, so his brother soundproofs his room, but that doesn't stop Suichi, and that's it. That's the story. And the second story is about this guy's dream self trying to get out of his body into the real world, and that was decent, but overall the episode is a 3 out of 10. Episode 5, so a group of friends meet this new guy, and they learn an alternate dimension version of this new guy kills the alternate dimension versions of them, and that's, yeah. And then the next story is pretty cool. It's about a girl whose hair comes to life and decapitates her for trying to cut it. And it kind of goes on a murder spree, and it's spooky as hell. I really love that story, but the first one drags this episode down. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. Episode 6, so the protagonist lets people stay at his new house while he's away, but they get all gunked up, and the house gets all gunked up, then he comes home and gets all gunked up. The next story is about a man that lives in a library, and some of his books go missing, and he freaks out, but then the books visit him as ghosts. He then remembers every book ever, and I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. Episode 7. So the protagonist hits this girl with his car, and then he finds out that people turn into tombstones when they die in this weird town. So that girl becomes... Well, he tried to hide the body by putting it in the trunk, but then she became a tombstone in the trunk. It's blah, 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 whatever. You know, it's a 5 out of 10 episode. Episode 8. So a mom that's a very toxic mother finds out her daughter is like a tree in the way that all of her previous ages are like layered every time it turns a new age, it's like a new layer of skin is grown, and it covers up her previous age. So she tries to peel her daughter down to her 2-year-old self, but ends up turning her into some fucked up tree monster thing. She then tries to do the same thing to herself, but she doesn't have the tree disease, so she kind of just rips off her face. And this story is fucking awesome. But the next story is about some ugly fish that turn people into parasites, and that's not so good. But I think that first episode still carries it to an 8 out of 10. Episode 9, this is a Tomie episode. A girl takes a photo of her, revealing her gross-ass affliction. Tomie then tries to get people to kill this girl, and that's pretty much it. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. Episode 10, the first story is about this weird Buddhist cult that kind of like walk into a maze of mummies to mummify themselves, and it's pretty boring, but it has a cool ending. The second story is about a girl who bullies a kid, but then she later marries that kid when they're both adults, but then she turns around and has a kid with that guy, and then she abuses the kid, and it's really just sad. And I'm giving this episode a 2 out of 10. Episode 11, a man hears children playing from an alley next door. Turns out that they are like shadow people, and they were killed by his roommate. And there's more to it, but I don't have the time to get into the details. The second story is about a man that makes headless sculptures, and he's found beheaded, and it turns out his sculptures come to life and they want heads. And I like that story a lot. The episode comes out to a 7 out of 10. And finally, episode 12. The first story is about a girl that can't make any decision. Like, even like small, teeny, weeny decisions. So she has this other lady whisper every single decision into her ear for her. But at home, the whispering lady is abused by her boyfriend, who eventually ends up killing her. However, her ghost goes on to haunt that girl, and that girl becomes sort of like schizophrenic, kind of haunted by this whispering lady, and she avenges her, and it's honestly a pretty feel-good story. I think this was a happy story, all things considered. But then we move into the next story, and once again we end on Suichi. His family gets a cat, and he makes it evil, and it's pretty boring outside of this moment. Overall, I give the episode a 6 out of 10. As many fans would say, the animations are better. However, in my personal opinion, the majority of the stories are a lot worse. Now, the average comes out to 5.5, and here I need to explain something. Just like how I don't grade things based on the school's grading system, I'm also going to take a different approach to rounding decimals. Still, anything below a 0.5 will be rounded down, and still, anything above a 0.5 will be rounded up, but when I get a 0.5, I am going to personally decide whether I think the show should be rounded up or down. And I think this show is closer to a 5 than a 6. So this show gets a 5 out of 10. This brings our year score to a 6.2 out of 10. Alright, Squid Game Season 2. Now, I'm a big fan of the first season, and, well, that's it. I don't have anything else to say about that, so let's just get into it. Episode 1, so we follow Ji-hun and Jun-ho as they both individually try to investigate the games, and then Jun-ho is helped by his boat friend that saved him. Somehow. And then they can't find the islands, even though he was, like, picked up near them. Very suspicious. And Ji-hun employs his former loan sharks to search for the recruiter, and it gives the loan sharks a depth that I appreciate. They find the recruiter, and he ends up constructing some fucked up games of his own, including a rock, paper, scissors, Russian roulette between the loan shark boss and the other guy, which ends up with the boss dying. The recruiter then finds Ji-hun, and they play Russian roulette, which Ji-hun wins. I don't think this season could have started better. I give this episode a 10 out of 10. Episode 2. Jun-ho crosses paths with Ji-hun, and they form a squad with the other guy. At the same time, we get acquainted with this other unrelated character, Kang, who seems to be down on her luck as well. The main squad forms a militia and plans to kidnap the front man, but he outsmarts them and kidnaps Ji-hun to be put back into the games. A recruiter approaches Kang, and we get the twist that she's actually a triangle soldier, not a participant. Now, Kang has a lot more scenes throughout the show, but they aren't actually important to this season. I'm sure it's building up to something in the next season, but I'm going to stop talking about her from this point for the sake of saving time. Anyway, I give this episode a 7 out of 10. Episode 3. The games begin with a twist. Now, they can all quit and split the current prize money. So it adds a little more to the trolley problem that is the Squid Game. Jihan is reunited with his friend Jung Bae from the first season, and then we get to red light, green light. Jihan realizes the tracker he brought is missing and that he's totally fucked, so he pulls this badass instructor stunt where he tells people, like, you're gonna die if you don't, yeah. That's what he said. That's an actual quote. And we learn this guy, Thanos, is a cock. After the game, they all do a vote to decide if they're going to keep playing, and it's a tie left up to one player, Player 1, who votes that they should keep playing. But here's another twist. Player 1 is actually the front man. What? I give this episode an 8 out of 10. Episode 4. The front man gets cozy with Jihan and his squad, and we learn a little bit about him. Then we move to the next game, which is a 6-legged race to complete 5 different mini-games before the timer runs out, and it's intense. I give this episode a 9 out of 10. Episode 5. Picking up where it left off, our team of secondary main characters succeeds in the games, just barely beating the timer. It's a hell of an intro. I mean, holy shit. This was... wow. Wow. I like this show. This show's pretty good in my opinion. The main squad is pretty stacked. They kind of just effortlessly plow through the games, except that the front man kind of fucks around and pretends like he's really bad at the game, which nearly gets them killed. After the game, they vote. Blue wins again. There's a lot of yapping, all good yapping, but a lot of yapping. Then they enter the next game, Mingle. I give this episode a 10 out of 10. Episode 6. So... Mingle plays out, our first main character dies, then her friend is upset, obviously, but her friend voted blue, so, I don't know, maybe don't be so selfish? When you vote blue, you're not just putting your own life on the line, you're putting the life of everybody that voted red. Like, this is kind of what you wanted. They vote again, and once again it's a tie. This leads to a confrontation in the bathroom where one of the red voters kills Thanos with a fork in self-defense. I give this episode a 10 out of 10. Episode 7, the bathroom bursts into a big fight. Meanwhile, the boat guy that Jun-Ho has been trusting is a twist villain. Wow, I saw that shit coming from episode 1. I'm not alone in that. I mean, this guy was just obviously a villain, and they should have either tried harder to make that less obvious, or they should have just been open about that like they were with the front man, because this twist just kind of sucks. Honestly, it would have been a twist if he wasn't a twist villain. Like, if he was just, like, actually trying to help. So the lights are going out for nighttime, and it's obvious that they're going to be a big fight. The Blues are going to try to kill the Reds, because after the bathroom fight, they're down some people. So, is Ji-Hun's plan to prevent them from doing so? To defend against them? Nope, his plan is to not tell anybody except his immediate squad, let a bunch of Reds die, play dead, and then attack the Shape Soldiers. This plan is dumb for a lot of reasons, but mostly because the Blues are not gonna fucking help you, you know? They want to benefit from the games. So you're gonna have less people to revolt against the Shape Soldiers. And it's also just immoral because you're sacrificing the people that want to leave as opposed to the people that actively want others to die. Like, you could have at least warned the other Reds and still went through with the playing dead plan. It's, whatever, I'm gonna move on from this. They successfully steal some weapons and kill some soldiers and begin their overthrowing. And the front man obviously betrays them, kills Jung Bae, and then the rebellion is quickly snuffed out. And unfortunately, the finale is the weakest episode, but it's not terrible. In fact, I would still give it a 7 out of 10. But it does have its problems. After calculating the average, this season of the show is a 9 out of 10. And this show is probably a top 10 show for me. It's really good. And this brings our year score up to a 6.6 out of 10. So I saw this in theaters, and that initial twist where she's a robot, fucking mind-blowing. It is genius. Genius writing, genius marketing. I can't praise it enough. It's just an amazing twist. And I also want to credit the editing. I think the editing in this movie was pretty good. Not as incredible as the twist was, but above average for sure. But once you get over the novelty of the twist, like once you're like, okay, she's a robot, the movie kind of dips in quality. And I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm not saying that at all. It's still a good movie, but it's just a good movie, you know? Like, this movie has an incredible moment in an otherwise decent movie. Overall, I give it a 7 out of 10. So it didn't actually budge the overall score very much, so we're still ending January on a 6.6 out of 10. But it's a stronger 6.6 out of 10. So there's this little girl that's murdered in church, and a few people suspect that it's her brat sister Alice. And to be fair, it kind of seems like it's her brat sister Alice. However, at the start of the movie, we get this scene.
Oh! Nasty child.
Which led to my initial thought, that's suspect number 1. Suspect number 2 was her fat landlord, but he obviously can't because he's too fat. And the killer is supposed to look like Alice for obvious reasons, so it just doesn't, it doesn't work. And then suspect 3 arises after the murder when the mother's sister, Annie, moves in, and not only does she hint that it was probably Alice, but she seems to dislike the fact that she's a brat. I mean, why wouldn't she? But Annie seemed too obvious, and it was obvious that she was a red herring, so my final answer was suspect number 1, an old lady named Tredoni. I doubled down on this when she intentionally tries to block a phone call from the deceased father to the pastor. There's a scene where the fat man tries to sexually assault Alice, but she gets away by murdering one of his cats. And this isn't really important to the plot at all, but it's a wild-ass scene, so I thought I'd mention it. Annie gets attacked, and Alice claims it was her dead sister. And I think as the audience, we're either supposed to think that since the red herring has been removed from the suspects list, that it either has to be Alice or it has to be a ghost story. Or maybe we're supposed to think, oh, who could it be? But it just obviously seems like it's Tredoni. And then there's this phone call scene that's probably the creepiest scene in this entire movie. Then the dad gets a call from someone claiming to be his niece, saying she has a piece of evidence, and it kind of sounds like Tredoni. Then we proceed to the goofiest murder in slasher history, and then it's revealed that it's Tredoni. What? No. Then there's 30 more minutes left. There's 30 more fucking minutes of this movie left. So she murders the fat guy, a cop sees her, and they aim to arrest her at church. They do that, but not before she kills the pastor. And this movie was boring, predictable, the sound quality was terrible, but I think these are all under the umbrella of a larger problem. This movie is just old. It was made at a time where there wasn't really a lot of whodunits out, and people were still excited that The Wizard of Oz invented color, but unlike some classics, this one does not stand the test of time. I give it a 3 out of 10. And this brings our score all the way down to a 6.2 out of 10. This is a sketch show, so I can't really, comment on the writing or anything. So I'm really just ranking how funny I think each episode is. And I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna say my favorite sketch and then rate it. Episode 1. So my favorite sketch in this one was the last one, the driving crooner, and this episode was pretty funny, 8 out of 10. Episode 2, I actually really enjoyed 2 sketches in this episode. The dog doors one was really good, but I also really liked that egg feeder sketch. And this episode was actually kind of chock full of good sketches. My favorite episode of the season by far. I give it a 9 out of 10, and it's all downhill from here. Episode 3. So my favorite sketch of this episode was the first one, the jelly bean guy who was pantomiming. Unfortunately, the rest of the sketches weren't really good, but that first one was pretty good. I give it a 6 out of 10. Episode 4. My favorite sketch in this one was the last one about the guy that went batshit in a kid's classroom. The other sketches were decent, but not great. I give it a 6 out of 10. Episode 5. This episode only had 3 sketches in it, and my favorite one was the middle one about the photo shoot, but the other 2 were kind of mid, so I'm giving this one a 6 out of 10. Episode 6. My favorite sketch in this episode was the first one, but I think it kind of went on too long. I think it would have been funnier if, it kind of just got cut in half. And then all the other sketches after that one just legitimately sucked. I mean, they had their funny moments. Tim Robinson is a funny guy, but this is definitely the worst episode of the season. I give it a 4 out of 10. After calculating the averages, this show ended up being a 6.5 out of 10, and I have made the decision to round up, because I like Tim Robinson. I think this was a funny show. It's funny. I enjoyed watching it. So this season of this show is a 7 out of 10, which brings our year score up to a 6.3 out of 10.
My baby's gone. He's gone away. He won't be back.
Okay, so I thought this movie was gonna be some crappy slasher with a dumb gimmick. But to my surprise, it was actually a great slasher with a dumb gimmick. The dialogue is great, the killer is very Jason-esque in a good way, and as far as slashers go, it has decent subversion. I do want to mention, they did this bit where once the killer's dead and they take off his mask, it's just some dude. But then later it turns out that there's 3 of them and the other 2 are characters we know, and first of all, the actual killer reveal, the other 2, was just so typical, generic, and boring. and definitely lessened my viewing experience for a movie that I thought was otherwise clever. Which leads me to another point. I thought it was so funny that it was just some dude, and I think they really should have left it at that. Like, I get it, then we don't know why or whatever, but save that for the fucking sequel or something, because I thought it was really funny to just leave it on, like, just being some random fucking dude. That would have been actually groundbreaking. Not that it hasn't been done before, but it's still a subversion, and it would have still spared me from that awful killer reveal that happens later in the movie. Overall, though, I give this movie a solid 8 out of 10, which brings the year score to a 6.5 out of 10.
My bum is on the cheese! Bum is on the cheese! If I get lucky, I'll get a disease! My bum is on the Swedish!
I have to admit something. I watched this documentary out of pure vitriol for Tom Green. I watched Freddy Got Fingered, I watched some of his stand-up, and I decided he was my arch nemesis. And while there are moments in this documentary that reinforce that idea, such as the fact that he directed it himself, which is sad, especially when he fishes for compliments, and there's a part where he tries to defend Freddy Got Fingered, which I will get back to, but I have to also admit that this documentary opened my eyes a little to Tom Green as a whole, and I can see the appeal. I can respect his ambition, I can understand his importance, and dare I say I see some of myself in him and his knack for thinking outside the box. So I no longer consider him my arch nemesis. I am no longer a Tom Green hater, but I'm still not a fan, and that brings me back to when he tries to defend Freddy Got Fingered. He attributes some of the reasons it failed to it pushing buttons, or being different from the formula everybody's used to. But those things are fine if your movie didn't fucking suck. But his movie sucked because it was pointlessly disregarding of the structure. You know, like if you're gonna break the form, you have to have a reason to do so. All the characters were unlikable, and most importantly, it was terribly unfunny. Which brings me to the reason I dislike Tom Green. He's so terribly unfunny. And no matter how much I can respect his innovation and his creative genius for breaking boundaries, his humor is just so mind-numbingly bad to me. He wasn't a terrible rapper though.
But I pay my dues, I lay more chicks than Mother Goose. Pass the OJ cause I got juice. Break the silence and make the truth. So yes, y'all.
Anyway, as for the documentary itself, I have to give it credit for actually swaying my opinion on Tom Green, but it was also awkward and boring, so 5 out of 10 for conflicted. This brings down the year score to a 6.3 out of 10.
Come out and play.
I can't say much about this movie that the title doesn't say for me, but just to sum it up, this movie sucks. The only good thing I can say about it is there's actually a surprising amount of funny bits in here, but overall it's a 2 out of 10. This brings the year score down to a solid 6 out of 10. So another gay movie. So some horny lesbos decide to start a fight club to get close to their crushes.
We're not gonna be sexy little high schoolers forever.
And somebody wrote that line. The plot is very straightforward, very tropey. They start the club, they have fights, they make up, they save the day. And I'm just gonna jump straight into the pros and cons of this movie. And in true Mr. Nitpick fashion, I'm gonna start with the cons. Con number 1. As my previous description implies, the plot is thin, and this movie feels like it's mostly filler. Con number 2, and this is my biggest gripe with this movie. During the whole movie, the football team and the girls' club have this beef going on with each other. The movie clearly sets up the football team to be the antagonists, but they don't get any retribution for their antagonizing, because last second they are swapped out for the opposing football team as the bad guys. Just these generic antagonists. And that is the absolute worst thing about this movie, and it kind of ticks me off. I'm fucking fired up right now, man. I'm so pissed. Con number 3, there are a couple moments in this movie where a joke flops, but it just keeps going, and it really flops. But let's get to the pro. And yes, I mean pro as in singular pro. And that pro is that this movie is actually fucking hilarious. The jokes don't often miss, and they usually hit hard. This is probably the funniest movie I've seen for the first time this year. And because of that, and because it doesn't do anything else wrong, I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. This movie is so funny that it counters all the cons. This brings the year slightly up to a 6.1 out of 10.
Too many broken hearts have fallen in the river. Too many lonely souls have drifted out to sea.
So it's an absolute coincidence that Marshawn Lynch is also in this movie. The action in this movie totally ruled, and the movie had some really funny moments. And I also want to say that Raven was such a cool character, and I would watch the fuck out of a Raven spin-off movie. However, the plot was very boring, very tropey. The villain is so uninteresting when he very easily could have been interesting, being the protagonist's brother and all. And the emotional scenes are not earned. It's mostly a forgettable movie. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 4 out of 10, and we're ending February on a solid 6 out of 10. And it was funny as hell. And also, the cinematography was gorgeous, and it was decently spooky. My only issue with this movie is it didn't do enough for me to give a flying fuck about either of the brothers. You know, the two antagonists. Especially the brother, who was just kind of a piece of shit from the get-go. But overall, I'm a big fan. Give it a solid 8 out of 10, which means we're starting March with a solid 6 out of 10.
Hey, hey, G, take me back to B.I.W. Hey, G,
So I saw this at a local theater, and when I was originally watching it, I didn't even realize it was based off of a true story, and so I was really fixing to tear into this until at the very end where it showed all the real people, and I'm like, oh, okay. Upon that realization, I think my only problem with this movie is the Act 2, and I know what you may be thinking, Caleb, you just said it was based on a true story, but hear me out, fucking bear with me. It's based off this woman's real life and her fight against this authoritarian government that kidnaps her husband. It starts out with you seeing their happy family, then we see the husband get kidnapped by the government, then you see this escalation, she gets kidnapped herself, she gets released, she investigates, and there's a lot of family drama. And then there's a lot more family drama. And she's kind of moping around. And then they decide to move houses. And then there's a 25-year jump. And then all of a sudden she's being interviewed and celebrated as a public figure and author that fought against an authoritarian government and has finally secured her husband's death certificate. And then there's this resolution and the end. So that leaves me wondering why the fuck they had a 25-year jump where they don't show any of the steps she took, any of the work that she put in to become a writer, except her saying she's gonna go back to college. It doesn't say how she fought back and how exactly that contributed. If the argument here is that it's screen time, they could have easily cut a lot of the extra family drama crap, and they could have summarized the investigative stuff real easy. And even if it was sloppy, I feel much more inclined to excuse that on the basis of based on a true story over a 25-year jump where apparently some important stuff happened. Aside from this glaring issue, it was a touching story, a rather relevant story, and it was somewhat well done. I give it a 6 out of 10, which means the year is staying at a 6 out of 10.
See the farmer on the other side of town. He's always working till the sun goes down.
So I had to watch this for work. I like the editing and directing style for a documentary. I thought it was pretty neat. They also had this segment where they weren't allowed to film the process of how corn syrup is made, so they made it themselves, which I thought was clever and fun. However, the subject matter was boring as hell, and I learned more from that one episode of Adam Ruins Everything where he talks about corn than I did from this entire documentary. I give it a 5 out of 10, which brings the year down to a 5.9 out of 10. Once again, I'm watching an anime because of Dead by Daylight. I saw this meme, and I thought it was funny because this is how I feel as a Dead by Daylight fan, forcing myself to watch Tokyo Ghoul. Episode 1. This show could not have started more obnoxiously. Obnoxious music, obnoxious characters, and obnoxious dialogue. So I meet Ken Kaneki, who's got a crush on a girl that's a ghoul, but he doesn't know she's a ghoul until she tries to eat him. Luckily for him, some scaffolding falls and crushes her like a fucking Looney Tunes episode, and that scaffolding injures him, and so they're rushed to a hospital where the surgeon makes the decision to save Ken by transplanting the ghoul's organs into him. And this doesn't make sense for a whole bunch of reasons. Like these. Anyway, he's a ghoul now. Can you guess where he lives? So then we get some exposition. He finds a ghoul who gets murdered by this nerd ass, and then this chick Toka saves him, and then there's a bunch of random ghoul politics that don't come up again, at least in this season, and then Toka force feeds Ken people meat. And the music is tone deaf, so I give this episode a 4 out of 10. Episode 2. So in this episode, Nerdass is back, and he tries to kill Ken's buddy because people are cattle or some shit. But Ken uses the power of friendship to unlock his ghoul powers and shove this four-eyed ghoul supremacist into a metaphorical locker. But then he tries to eat his friend, but is once again bailed out by Toka. I give the episode a 5 out of 10. Episode 3. So this is kind of just a delayed exposition episode. We learn the Ghoul Cafe that Toka and now Ken work for sources their food from suicides. We're also acquainted with a couple of guys that work for the CCG, which is essentially the Ghoul Police. We're gonna call them Rick and Morty. Ken goes to the Ghoul Tailor to get a ghoul mask made. Then he bonds with some little ghoul girl over some books. I also give this episode a 5 out of 10. Episode 4. So this episode revolves around a blue-haired ghoul that tries to cannibalize Ken. He fails. I give this episode a 6 out of 10. It was entertaining. Episode 5. If for some reason you haven't seen the show, it's established early on that ghouls can't eat human food. But this episode starts with Toka eating human food because she's a stupid fucking idiot. The real reason, or the other real reason that she's doing this, is because she likes this human girl that keeps making food for her and she never fucking comes up again. And this whole stupid subplot is contrived to serve a stupid point later in the episode. So later in the episode, Ken saves Four Eyes, and now they're fucking friends or whatever, and he finds out that Four Eyes here has a human girlfriend, which means his humans are cattle rhetoric doesn't make a bit of goddamn sense. Anyway, Blue Hair kidnaps his girlfriend, and Ken, Four Eyes, and Toka go fight him. During the fight, we get Four Eyes' sob story and another bad music choice, and blah blah blah, they win the fight of course, 3 out of 10. Episode 6. So this whole episode is a nothing burger. The only important thing that does happen is that Rick and Morty capture the little ghoul girl and her mother. I give this episode a 4 out of 10. Episode 7. So the mom is killed, orphaning the child who does get away. Toka tries to get revenge, so she kills some random CCG guy to give Morty some revenge motivation, which we'll touch on earlier. Then she fights Rick and runs away because he's got the Ghoul Slayer 9000. Ken gets his mask. This episode was decent, but it had a lot of cringe shit in it, so 5 out of 10. Episode 8. So Toka fights Rick while Ken holds off Morty. Ken takes the pacifist approach. Until he doesn't. Toka kills Rick, which was the most interesting character in my opinion, so this show got a whole lot less interesting. Anyway, now that he's dead, Morty here has a pretty big reason to get revenge, so that guy that died in the last episode seemed to be nothing but boring filler. And this episode, while pretty cool at some parts, is chock full of cringy ass dialogue, so I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. Episode 9. So we get the Rick and Morty backstory, then we get Toka's sob story, then we meet Toka's brother who leads a bunch of ghouls, and I want to touch on this. This show has this sort of problem in general where they give you a backstory on a need-to-know basis. So they'll show you a piece of backstory that just immediately becomes relevant, as opposed to showing the backstory earlier and having it be this sort of cool callback, this build-up, you know? It's like, oh no, protagonist is in front of a locked door. Cue the flashback where they learn how to pick locks and their mother told them right before she died to always keep a lockpick on you. Back to the present, where the protagonist whips out their lockpick at the door. It's fucking stupid. Anyway, the ending was cool, but the rest of the episode sucked, so 4 out of 10. Episode 10. A bunch of ghouls show up at the Ghoul Cafe. This guy, Jason, who has been a prominent character throughout the season that I just haven't mentioned, but here he is, and he beats the shit out of Ken, which is honestly brutal, and I think it's good. Then he kidnaps Ken, and all the ghouls at the Ghoul Cafe are all like, let's go save him. I give the episode a 5 out of 10. Episode 11.
Did you see that? That's how you take out a goddamn sniper's nest, you sackless clods! Hop to it!
So there's this giant war between the ghouls and the ghoul police. Meanwhile, Jason tortures Ken. Then, of course, we get the flashback of Jason's sob story explaining why he tortures people. So this guy, who I'm going to call Scarecrow, is the newest interesting character of the ghoul police. And they kick some ghoul ass. Toka and Morty fight again, but Toka is tagged out by the Bean Brothers. I admit this episode was pretty bangin'. I'm a sucker for climax. I'm giving this episode a 7 out of 10. Episode 12. So Ken is tortured some more. Then we get Ken's sob story. Then his hair turns white. Then he fights and kills Jason. And this episode was mostly cool as well. I give it a 7 out of 10. I guess I didn't really touch much on this episode. It's like a big character development for Ken. It's like It's done pretty well. For the most part, this show is everything I dislike about anime. It's over-the-top exaggeration, it has corny-ass dialogue, there's a bunch of info dumping, the characters seem more like caricatures, and some of them don't even contribute enough to justify being there. However, I did thoroughly enjoy the last 2 episodes, and the show does have a few interesting characters. It ends up being a 5 out of 10, but the year stays at a 5.9 out of 10. I saw this one in theaters. A lot of people really didn't like this movie. I, for one, did. I thought the movie was fun, funny, interesting. My panties weren't twisted over the political commentary, unlike a certain group of snowflakes. However, I did have 2 issues with it. The first one, which is the smallest one, but a pretty big one. I wish the body printing gimmick was used more and throughout the plot, especially given that we see pretty much all of it used in the trailer. And my biggest problem is there was just way too many subplots that went absolutely nowhere. That whole thing with the loan shark, Timo, his drug business, and him being a shitty friend in general, that all goes nowhere. That one chick that was into Mickey, including the dead girl that died in the cavern, and the cheating implications on Natasha, and I could probably point out more if I wanted to rewatch it, but you get my point. Just a whole bunch of shit that is just not relevant. All that being said, I do think the film is enjoyable, and while I think a lot of the potential was wasted, I think a lot of it was put to great use, and I give it a 7 out of 10. And that brings the year to a 5.95 out of 10. Once again, I took too long reviewing the first season, just like the Junji Ito thing, so I'm gonna have to zoom through this one. Episode 1. So the fights continue where they left off in Season 1, and even where Ken left off at the end of Season 1, his character change seems too abrupt. Like, I understand he's going to have massively changed after being tortured and consuming Jason, but to go from wimpy limp dick to rock-hard boner in the span of a single episode is a bit silly. Anyway, he saves Toka, tells her he's joining the bad guys, doesn't elaborate, then walks off to some corny-ass music. This episode is a 5 out of 10. Episode 2. This episode was boring as fuck. The only thing to really note is Morty gets assigned to Rick's daughter. We'll call her Beth. It's 3 out of 10. Episode 3. All I put in my notes is that this episode was somewhat interesting. I guess it's getting a 6 out of 10. Episode 4. Morty and Beth enter the ghoul jail. Beth does a lot of info dumping, which literally goes against her character. Earlier, she says she doesn't have time for politeness because it's a waste of seconds, but that doesn't stop her from filling the audience in on information that we already fucking know. Ghoul Squad attacks the ghoul jail. There are so many things in this episode that I can nitpick, but I'm not going to for the sake of time. The only good thing about this episode is Scarecrow. 3 out of 10. Episode 5. Ken gets a major upgrade just to immediately get his ass kicked by Morty. The owl abducts him. This is a 5 out of 10. Episode 6. This episode is kinda horseshit. 4 out of 10. Episode 7. So Blue Hair spends time with the little ghoul girl, and this is where I want to address a tone issue with the entire show. All the characters go from gritty to soft, or from soft to gritty, as fast as you can flip a pancake. One example is when Nerdass went from being a borderline psycho to being some dork in a coffee shop. It's like the show can't decide if it wants to be dark or cute. Also on Blue Hair, the gourmet, he's an annoying ass character, and he should have died in that one episode where they defeated him. Anyway, Ken is back at the cafe, and him and Toka have a little argument. The first half of this episode sucked, and the second half was decent. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. Episode 8. Old Guy is the Owl. We hear a sob story, and then the ghoul police decide they're going to attack the coffee shop. 4 out of 10. Episode 9. This episode is trying to make me feel very strongly about the characters. It's supposed to be a very emotional episode, but none of it really lands the way it's trying to, and instead it kind of just comes off as cringy. The scenes themselves are not the problem. I could see under a different context how these scenes would make me feel the way it wants me to. So the issue lies in the build-up. This emotional arc was not properly built up to, there were corners cut, and it's all premature and it just comes off as amateur writing. But moving on.
So that mask of yours, there's no reason for you to wear it anymore, is there?
Hey buddy, you ever hear of this thing called style? 3 out of 10. Episode 10. Bunch of fights. Most notably, my favorite femboy goes up against the owl, and that's pretty sick. There was some more emotional moments in this episode, but this time around they did hit. Not as much as they were trying to, but it was felt. Anyway, the real owl shows up, and this episode gets a 5 out of 10. Episode 11. There's a big fight between ghouls and ghoul police. Morty and Ken go toe-to-toe again. Something I've noticed over the last couple episodes is how this show overuses flashbacks. And again, this episode also really set off the nitpick meter, but I'm just gonna spare you the details for the sake of time. It ends with Ken face-to-face with his friend. Cool ending. Not cool enough to save the episode. It's a 3 out of 10. Episode 12. They kind of just talk, and then he dies? I think he dies. I'm not really sure what was going on there. The dialogue could have been better, and Ken probably could have got him to a hospital if he tried. It was just overall a bad finale. Not nearly as great as the last season's. 3 out of 10. This season comes out to be a 4 out of 10, which brings the year score back to a 5.95 out of 10. So I've got a plethora of nitpicks for this one, so I'm gonna do it Cinema Sin style. But before I do, I just want to say that the editing in the opening was really cool. Mom barges in with the most obvious time travel story setup. She's attacked by a killer she's been preparing for, but is absolute dog shit when it comes to strategy. Trick-or-treaters find her body, but who the fuck just walks into somebody's house when they don't answer the door? A lot of contrived dialogue for the sake of info dumping. This chick is casually building a time machine, and that's not a bad thing, that's actually really cool. But for somebody smart enough to build a time machine, she sure doesn't seem to acknowledge any of the ramifications of changing the past. Anywho, the main character goes back to 1987.
And there's the racism.
She finds out her mom's a total bitch mean girl. This one's also cool. She tells these guys that she's a time traveler right before she tells them she's from Canada, as if she didn't just tell them that she's a time traveler. So the lady that built the time machine, her mom designed it, and so our protagonist finds her mom for help, and they find out that the present and both times are happening simultaneously. But if that's the case, wouldn't the mom have memories of them hanging out? Therefore, everything that's going to happen, therefore it's already happened. The protagonist's constant white knighting is such a fucking drag. This happens. As if this guy's ego would just let him brush this off. The police don't take the protagonist seriously as a time traveler or a suspect after she's predicted the first murder in town ever. There's no reason not to tell Pam, her mom, about time traveling, but they don't, and instead tell her that the protagonist is a psychic. This chick, Heather, kicks the killer. He stood there for like 2 whole minutes. They equate the protagonist's phone battery at 33% to 7.5 hours left to get her home because they need her phone. So why doesn't she turn the phone off to conserve battery? Also, if this chick can build a time machine, I'm sure she can make a fucking phone charger. Obvious red herring. Doug is the killer and they kill him. This contradicts the previous thing she said about not disappearing if she's never born. Aside from all these issues, this movie had some fun callbacks, some funny moments, and a solid ending. But because of all these issues, it's a 4 out of 10. This brings the year to a 5.9 out of 10. This movie didn't have any major problems, but it did have a shitload of minor problems. I watched this movie with somebody else, so I didn't take notes, and therefore I can't list all of those problems out like I did with Totally Killer. But they're there. It's a 4 out of 10, and this brings the year down to a 5.8 out of 10. I saw this in theaters. This had so little to do with the game, and it actually reminded me a lot more of Dead by Daylight than Until Dawn. It's kind of mid, kind of fun. It's a very tame 5 out of 10. This ends April with a 5.75 out of 10. And side note, I did not watch 2 movies in theaters this month, so I will have to watch a 3rd movie in theaters sometime this year. So I'm going to spend a little more time on this movie because it's something of a big deal for me. This movie being made is like a childhood dream of mine. Now I will admit that when I initially saw the trailers, like everybody else, I assumed it was going to be a pile of garbage. But I, like everybody else, actually kind of liked it. The movie was fun, it was funny, and as somebody that loves Minecraft with a burning passion, it has appeased me. But it has its flaws, as I am about to point out. For starters, the acting was flatter than a super flat world. The actors responsible for Henry and Natalie demonstrated some of the worst acting I've seen from a high-budget film like this. Now, I don't know Danielle Brooks, but she seems like she'd be a good comedy actress, but for the scenes that aren't supposed to be all laughs, she was kind of bad. And I expect a lot from Jack Black in terms of acting, but in this movie, it's not his finest by a long shot, which makes me think that the acting problem across the board can be attributed to poor direction. Jason Momoa fucking killed it though. The movie had some very sloppy writing, and they kind of shoehorned the theme of creativity in there without really letting it breathe. But this is an excusable offense for a video game movie because they do have to fit in a lot of fan service, which is totally understandable. And it's a good thing that my expectations for this movie were low, because if I was expecting a Minecraft movie that met all my desires, I would have been sorely disappointed. I'd expect a bulkier Steve that's on a mission to slay the Ender Dragon, to prevent the overworld's transformation into the end. The after credits wouldn't feature Alex, as she would have already been incorporated into this movie, but would instead feature Herobrine. But this movie is not that. This movie is not a good Minecraft movie, but instead a decent movie that does a great job of incorporating Minecraft. It's like the Barbie movie in that sense, but it does leave a lot to be desired. But for what it is, I enjoyed it. That being said, there is no reason at all the Great Hog couldn't have been the Wither, and that small detail really pissed me off. Like, the entire movie, I was just pissed off thinking about that. Anyway, if I was judging this movie on a more objective basis, I'd probably give it a 5 or a 6, but because I own Minecraft on 4 different devices, it's getting some bias points. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. This brings the year score to a 5.8 out of 10. Clean shave. Alright, hot take. I'm not a fan of Spielberg. I think his movies are tropey, they're cliche, they're boring, they just don't subvert expectations in any way. And this movie is no different than that. And Spielberg's formula doesn't necessarily mean his movies are bad. In fact, I don't think I've seen a Spielberg movie that I could call bad. But what it does mean is that none of his movies exceed okay. They're all fucking mid. Unless you consider boring bad, which I guess it is. Which in that case, some of them are fucking bad, actually. And what's worse is that Spielberg doesn't even like this movie. And I got some nitpicks to diss out with this one. And we're gonna start with the protagonist, Peter Banning, or Peter Pan. The thing is he fucking forgot he was Peter Pan. And that brings me to my first nitpick. How the fuck do you forget you're Peter Pan? If I was fucking Peter Pan, I sure as hell wouldn't forget that shit. Hell, I'm Caleb Kitchen, and I don't even forget that shit. And they never explain, like, how he forgot he was Peter Pan. That never comes up. It's never explained. He just fucking did. Let's just suspend our beliefs, and let's just say, okay, fine. You know what? He forgot he was Peter Pan. Deal with it. But there's still one fucking issue with this shit. Him being an asshole businessman makes no goddamn sense at all. Just because you forget your identity, you don't change intuitively as a person. Amnesiacs don't end up being completely different fucking people. And yeah, I mean, there's gonna be changes, like the performative parts of a personality, but he is literally the exact opposite of himself in this movie. In fact, when he remembers that he's Peter Pan later in the movie, like when he's all like, oh my god, I'm fucking Peter Pan, he becomes a completely different character. He's just completely different. What the fuck, dude? That doesn't make fucking sense. We also learned the reason he left Neverland in the first place was to marry Wendy's granddaughter. That's a lot to unpack in of itself. First of all, why? Because he doesn't know her at all. So why give up immortality and the life you know in Neverland for this random fucking person that you don't know? And also, why, when he didn't do the same for Wendy, who he actually did know, and they had fucking feelings for each other? Why didn't he do the same thing for her? It's just a slap in the face to her that the moment she pumps out a fucking child, he decides he wants to settle down. Like, can you imagine being Wendy? What the fuck is that shit, dude? And lastly, him and Wendy just kind of make this decision for her. Like, she's fucking sleeping when Peter Pan makes this decision. What if she doesn't want to marry Peter Pan? What if she's not fucking into Peter Pan? What then? Like, what is this movie, dude? What is this movie? But let's talk about Wendy some more, because I have some more problems with Wendy, outside of the fact that she just fucking gave away her granddaughter without, consent. So, like, during the movie, she wants to remind Peter that he's Peter Pan. But, like, why the fuck didn't she just do this sooner? Like, she's known him since he was a child and then grew up outside of Neverland. Why never fucking mention this before? Why drop this bomb all of a sudden as if he would believe her? But then here, another question. Why did she let him forget he was fucking Peter Pan? Again, I don't know how he forgot, but it like correlates to him growing up, so I kind of figure it was like a gradual thing. So like, why would she let him do that, right? Why would she let him fucking grow up and forget all about quite literally who he was as a person? That doesn't make any goddamn sense either. But then there's this scene. There's this scene that is so fucking uncomfortable, and I don't understand. I don't understand anything about this movie, to be quite frankly honest with you. So for context, once Peter Pan decides to stay, he grows up under the care of Wendy, sort of as her grandchild. And also, that's also weird because that technically means that, like, Peter and Wendy's granddaughter are, like, kind of siblings. So the fact that they grow up and marry each other is also fucking weird, but backtrack. So Wendy is Peter's grandmother at this point, right? There's this scene, after he's forgotten he was Peter Pan, where she just admits to having a fucking crush on him, dude.
When I was young, no other girl held your favor the way I did.
That is disgusting. Can you imagine your fucking grandma telling you that she has a fucking crush on you, dude? That's disgusting. And somebody wrote this movie, dude. I can't, dude. I really can't. This is such a... I don't like this movie. I don't like this movie. Now, all that being said, this movie has its moments, all right? It's not like 100% bad. But the foundation it's built on is so stupid and ridiculous, but it has its moments. This movie has its moments. And this movie is also a Peter Pan movie, if you didn't know. And I kind of find there's like an inherent appeal to Peter Pan because the Peter Pan story in general is just kind of depressing in a very cool way. But that's not saving it at all. This movie's a fucking 3 out of 10. This brings the year to a 5.73. So I saw this movie in theaters, and it was phenomenal. I love Tim Robinson, and this movie, I mean, I don't have much to say about this movie because the plot is sort of like really thin. But it's not about the plot, more so is about the delivery of it, the execution. And that was just hilarious and so well done. So yeah, again, I don't have much to say about it, but it is an easy 8 out of 10. This brings the year to a 5.81 out of 10. I also saw this movie in theaters, and I went in blind. And boy, oh boy, am I glad that I went in blind. This movie is just incredible all around, but I do have one slight issue with the movie. I want to say I recommend the movie, and if you haven't seen it, I also recommend going in blind, but I'm going to talk about it. So the slight issue isn't really an issue, but it kind of is an issue. It's like, it's a little bit of both, and I'll tell you why, and that is because in Act 3, which is actually Act 1, because they did it in reverse. So, like, Act 3 is the beginning of the movie. In this part of the movie, the world is ending, and everybody's, like, upset about it. But meanwhile, there's, like, all these ads playing that, like, say, thanks, Chuck, for 40 great years. And they start appearing everywhere, out of nowhere, and nobody knows who Chuck is. But he seems to have some correlation with the end of the world. And then there's this one really cool scene that's, like, so fucking creepy, and it gives me shivers, and I'll play it, like, right now. And this whole act is just so masterfully unsettling. It sets up this, like, cosmic horror mystery. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, please don't be a coma dream. Please don't be a coma dream. And then Act 2 comes along and we learn that it was a coma dream. Now here's why it's sort of an issue, but sort of isn't an issue. The issue is that it was sort of predictable and also disappointing, but the reason it's not an issue is because it actually fits well with the movie. Because Act 2 and Act 1 are also really good, and it all fits well together. Act 3 belongs in this movie, and it's good. But I can't deny the disappointment that washed over me when I realized it was a coma dream, because I was hoping that there would be some phenomenal twist and my mind would be fucking blown, and that just wasn't the case. Because the third act of this movie, which is actually the first act, is something you rarely see, and it is something that I love. And that's cosmic horror mystery. I think those three things work well together. And the build-up and all the unanswered questions that had me at the edge of my seat was just squandered by something that was unjustly predictable. I just want to see some Reddit lamp shit with a good fucking ending. That's what I want. Still, this movie is an 8 out of 10, and that brings the year score to a 5.89 out of 10. Now, I am not a huge fan of coming-of-age films. And I know that's a blanket statement, and I could easily name a bunch of coming-of-age films that I love, but I feel like the genre is mostly misses. Even some of the critically acclaimed ones, I just don't like. Like, most of the time, the movie's entire point is, life is very nuanced. People are complicated. Yeah, I know, dude. And they don't tend to tell you this in an interesting way. Just a bunch of artsy shots and dialogue written by somebody who just read Philosophy for Dummies. No guns, no blood, no boobs. What the fuck? And sorry about this rant. I guess my point is that it's hard for a coming-of-age film to impress me. But it has happened, and if you want an example of such, look no further than I Like Movies. Hell, I relate to the title. This movie has no fucking guns or boobs or fucking blood, but the dialogue in it was written by a genuine fucking poet. And the artsy shots in this movie don't fucking carry all the weight. In fact, the dialogue is hilarious, the characters are awesome, and I just love this movie. And it is a coming-of-age film, so the plot is kind of thin, so I don't really have much to say about it. But I do have this to say. Vicariously via a movie clip from the movie I'm talking about.
It moved me emotionally, which I think is the highest compliment you could give to a filmmaker.
I'm giving it a high 8 out of 10. And that's 3 in a row right there, baby. And this brings the year score to a 5.96 out of 10.
Drag, filth, horror, glamour, Dracula.
So I am watching this show because of Dead by Daylight. Believe it or not. I even got the fucking shirt on right now. I have watched anime, and now I'm watching drag. Episode 1. So look, I'm not a fan of drag, nor am I a fan of reality TV outside of the Impractical Jokers. But what I am a fan of is horror. And seeing the costumes that these drag queens came up with is actually very entertaining to me. And I even liked the challenge that went with it was they were dressing up as witches and they got water tossed on them and they had to act like they were being melted. And I thought it was cool. I liked this. Although the ending of the episode was a bit confusing because it was an extermination challenge where they had to be buried alive. And the person that didn't chicken out before the other two was the one that got to stay. But then it didn't really get an ending and I don't really know what happened. So it's not getting any good points for that. But I do give it a 6 out of 10. Episode 2. So this episode started off with the continuation of the story, which was weird. I thought the burning of the witch thing was like a cool thematic outro. I didn't realize it was fucking canon. I didn't really like that. A lot of the yapping in the beginning was uninteresting, and this floor show's theme was not even horror, it was wrestling. The floor show also didn't have an additional challenge, but it did have some imagery I didn't ever want to fucking see, so yeah, I did not like this episode. The elimination challenge was also boring as hell. It's a 3 out of 10. Episode 3. Now we're back to the horror theme because this theme is zombies. It was cool to see the costumes and the floor shows challenge was actually very entertaining. They had to reenact like a zombie scene. But I was pretty disappointed with everybody's performance except for this queen's. And the elimination challenge was absolutely revolting, which I'm not sure is a good or bad thing. It's definitely what they were going for, but I don't know how I feel about that. And I also gotta say, like, I'm on the bandwagon of Loris is annoying as hell, right? But I just want to say that, like, the bunny design was actually really cool and interesting, and I got it right away. It's a zombie rabbit. I don't know why that's so hard to figure out. So, like, the shit that she got for showing up in this fucking bunny outfit was undeserved, and I actually thought it was one of the cooler costumes there. I give the episode a 6 out of 10. Episode 4. So the dressing room talk amongst the queens was actually really funny this time. They were just shitting on Loris, but for some reason the editor thought it was necessary to flash back to earlier in the conversation. Like, yeah, bro, I saw that 20 fucking seconds ago. Is the target audience for this goldfish? Like, I have an attention span. Like, it's there. You know, it's more likely that they expect people to just be on their fucking phones while watching this. Still, shouldn't cater to those people. This is me nitpicking. This is not that big of a deal. So the theme of this episode was also basic bitch. And not only is that not horror, but it was so much worse than the last non-horror theme. Like, it was just boring as fuck. Funny enough, I ended up liking this episode for the drama and not actually the costumes, but it's not saving the episode. It's a 4 out of 10. Episode 5. This episode was kind of 2 episodes. The first part was like a live show in San Francisco that had this sort of vague punk monster theme. And to be honest, I think it was underwhelming. It wasn't very interesting. The second part of the episode, however, was a photo shoot, and they did it like coming out of the water on the bay. And the theme was sea monsters. And it looked really good, and I was a big fan of that. I give this episode a 5 out of 10. Episode 6, the grand finale. They brought back all the losers at a table and like dropped a full-on drama bomb, and I thought it was fucking awesome. I was such a gossip girl watching this shit. Anyway, they made the 3 remaining queens do 3 costumes each with the themes of glamour, filth, and horror, and then they crowned the winner. And the winner was Vander, and I could not agree more. And look, I'll say it again, I'm not into drag. This show was not made for me by any metric, except the metric of Dead by Daylight licenses, but for the most part, this is not a show for me, right? But I can recognize passion, and this bitch is passionate. Not only passionate, but like consistently impressive, because I mean, to be honest, all of them had some level of passion, but this queen blew my mind, absolutely impressed me. I was looking forward to seeing what she had came up with in each episode, because amazing. Just amazing work. She was in one elimination challenge and it was because she volunteered. And not to mention, she was like totally humble about it. One of the nicer people there by a mile. And I'm blurry. I'm even more blurry now, so that's cool. But yeah, I mean, the win was totally deserved. This episode is gonna get a 7 out of 10. And with all the scores calculated, this show ended up being a 5 out of 10 from me. And this leaves the year score at a 5.93 out of 10.
You took a ride with a ticket to nowhere. Deep in the dark.
So this is the season that's relevant to Dead by Daylight, which is why I skipped the other 4 seasons. Episode 1. So this episode was just an entire fucking movie. It was an hour and a half, and it was just a movie. I also wrote in my notes here that I was not as much of a fan of this cast as I was with season 1's cast. That did not hold true. I definitely like this cast a lot more. The first floor show was iconic horror icons reimagined, and as a horror fan, this was pretty entertaining. The losing drag queens were sent to go shark diving, which was actually pretty underwhelming, to be honest. It's not a terrible episode, but it's just way too long for what it is. It's a fucking movie, so it's getting a 4 out of 10. Episode 2. You know, when I started watching the show, I was really just in it for the costumes and shit. Well, actually, I was in it for Dead by Daylight, but I've rapidly been getting invested in, like, the drama. It's thoroughly entertaining to see all of them openly talk shit about one another, but still remain collected and chill. I noticed that in my notes, looking back on this, I used the word bitch a lot. I think the show really fucking rubbed off of me when I was watching it. If I start saying bitches in my script, just know it's littered all throughout my notes here. Anyway, they make the bitches do dodgeball, which was fun as hell, but that resulted in the winner making this bitch prepare for the floor show with one arm taped to their side. The theme of the floor show was creepy dolls, which ended up really cool. The majority of the queens really impressed me with this one. They also got Dawn Mancini and Jennifer Tilly to guest judge, which was also really cool. I also want to comment on one queen in particular for a moment. I believe her name is Desiree. I wrote it down. I just forgot how to pronounce it since it's been a while since I've actually watched the show. She got put up for extermination and then started crying. And that's fine, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with crying, especially once you're put up for extermination. I can imagine that's pretty emotionally stressful. All right, but then immediately she starts harping on this other queen, Scylla. Like, don't diss it out if you can't take it. And you know what? I'm not even a fan of Scylla. I think all the critiques this far have been valid, but she's been taking that shit on the chin and still trying her best. So this moment really made me dislike Desiree. The extermination challenge was to see who can withstand the most piercings, and it was not a fun watch. And Scylla was sent home, unfortunately. I mean, again, I didn't like her, but I didn't like Desiree even more so. But this episode is still a high 7 out of 10 for me. The pre-show challenge this time around is to create a flirtatious dating profile while eating disgusting-ass bonbons. It's also not fun watch. The floor show's theme was holidays, and this was also a very neat theme, and a lot of the queens were very inspired. The losers had to go skydiving, and guess who? Desiree! And guess who was once again starting shit with the other loser because of their bruised, fragile ego? Desiree! And guess who got booted? Desiree! Deserved. Bye, bitch! This episode is a 6 out of 10. Episode 4. The queens today were performing in teams of 3 with the theme of Ghost Train. It's cool to see a team challenge. I thought the theme was somewhat limiting, but I was proven wrong by these absolute creative powerhouses. The extermination was electroshock, and the winner was unclear. Anyway, this episode is a 7 out of 10.
I'm not a killer.
So this electroshock challenge did not eliminate anybody because this queen voluntarily quit, so both the losers are still in the game. They made the queens do a musical with choreography and live singing. It was very silly, and the winning team got to choose the 2 that were up for extermination, and they threw out these 2, and they just had to do a lip sync battle right fucking then and there. I don't know, kind of a weak challenge, but whatever. It's a 6 out of 10, this episode. Episode 6. So the first challenge is using some black and white makeup, which is like hard to use, to make a scary face, and the winner of this gets to choose another contestant to sabotage. And that winner sabotages Gray Matter, my favorite of the bunch. The theme for the floor show was Monochrome Monster, and Gray Matter motherfucking won this floor show, even though sabotaged. Although I actually do like Auntie's, that's this queen's look significantly more, and I think that she should have won. But I'm happy that Gray stays winning. The extermination challenge was essentially putting the losers in a fucking no-breathe machine. Like, they were pretty much suffocated, and I'm not even really sure how that's legal. If it's probably not even real, I guess. But I don't know. 6 out of 10, episode 7. The theme of this episode was Dungeons and Dragons, or as they put it in the show, Dungeons and Drag Queens. The Boulets, the host of the show, they rolled for race and class for each of the drag queens, and they had to get into pairs and perform a battle sequence. Honestly, the floor show of this video is actually just a video of them fighting, and it was boring for the most part. The losers have to answer riddles correctly or else they get ugly tattoos, and that's especially fucked up knowing that one of them is going to be sent home regardless. But this episode was kind of a mixed bag. Good, bad, whatever. 5 out of 10. Episode 8. So the first challenge the contestants had to face was a shock collar trivia challenge, and the winner gets to cast a curse to make one of the others bald. So Asia ends up winning the challenge and then casting baldness on herself, which is such a big dick move. This queen has a pair of impressive balls. The theme this time was Frankenhooker, which isn't the most interesting, but they delivered. The losers were locked in a freezer until one of them cries uncle. I say the episode was a 6 out of 10. Episode 9. So this is the Dead by Daylight episode, and I am locked in. Now, I may not be the best judge of drag, which I don't know. I kind of am. I kind of actually closely align with the judges most of the time, so, you know, I think I'm learning, you know. I think I'm I think I could be a drag judge. Yeah. But regardless of that, I am a good judge of Dead by Daylight cosmetics. And the winner of this episode gets their design in the game as a cosmetic. So I'm about to have some strong fucking opinions. And boy, oh boy, did this show disappoint. In the moment I've been waiting for this entire fucking time, after this show has consistently impressed me, does this show disappoint me now? All the scripting in this episode is clearly part of the partnership agreement because it has some really corny ass Dead by Daylight references. Like, I feel like that the Boulets did not have much creative freedom over what they could say. Here's something that really pissed me off. They gave the episode a theme of cryptids and urban legends. Why? It seems like they already had an episode in mind and then slapped the Dead by Daylight partnership on top of it. If this was truly a Dead by Daylight episode like the Dungeons and Dragons was, why would they have a fucking additional like theme on top of it? I would have kind of liked it if it was like an open-ended challenge, like their own take on the killer, even like assigning them killers in the game to make a cosmetic for. Whatever, this pissed me off, but whatever, surely it can't get even worse than this, right? Matthew Cote was one of the guest judges. I could not tell by looking at them which killer they were supposed to embody, which is probably because they weren't supposed to fucking embody any of the killers. Like, the challenge was fucking cryptids and urban legends, not Dead by Daylight killers. And instead of telling us what killer that they could have embodied, they just listed a bunch of stats that don't make any fucking sense in the context of the game It's just disingenuous gamer stereotyping. Kote himself looks like he doesn't want to be there. He's giving off the most I'm just showing up for work vibe. It's just a fucking shameless cash grab. Even the extermination challenge was supposed to be Dead by Daylight themed. Like, look at all these interviews.
We are going into the game and we have to find all of these coffins worth blood points while dodging paintball.
Trying to dodge them, hiding behind boxes, moving boxes.
Right, Dead by Daylight, the game where you move boxes and dodge paintballs in search of blood points. Fuck you. Fuck you, dude. Asia won, and I'm glad. I'm happy for her. She was clearly the only one that fucking touched the game. And I'm truly not convinced that the Boulets have even touched the game. So, you know, hats off to Asia. And this isn't going to contribute to the score, but I want to say that the Boulet skin is really well done. The Asia skin, as stated, was kind of neutered. They can't give Huntress this Gooner skin. And I don't know why they were so opposed to doing a fucking sexy Huntress skin. All right, they got a fucking sexy Skull Merchant. They got Hooked on You, where the Huntress is quite literally sexualized. But in all seriousness, I think the skins were done relatively well. But compared to the Dragula episode of Dead by Daylight, the Dead by Daylight integration of the Dragula skins are fucking shining stars in comparison. I genuinely enjoyed watching this show, and this is the whole reason. This is the whole reason I was watching the show. I'm giving this episode a 1 out of 10. This was the most disingenuous bullshit. And then we move on to episode 10, the grand finale. Now, my top 3 made it to the top 3, and I'm honestly happy with whoever wins the competition. Like, these 3 were my absolute favorites. And since they took the Dead by Daylight episode from me, I want to give my thoughts on the final floor show. So, Anti-Heroine, she consistently impressed me throughout the show, but she really let me down in this episode. I mean, firstly, all of her looks were glamour, and none of them really blew me away like I've come to expect from her, and also the surprises weren't really surprising. Asia Consent did impress me in the filth and the horror, and hands down her horror piece was the best. Absolutely loved it. It was cool. It was great. Gray Matter's horror look was really good, but the performance was lacking, and the surprises were predictable. However, I think he beat Asia in the filth challenge, just barely. I would give him the win for that. And while Asia's performance was good, being a piece of shit for filth is just kind of cheap. Gray's dairy performance was like so original, and it portrayed filth in a lot of different ways. I don't know, I really liked Gray Matter's filth over Asia's. And as far as glamour goes, Gray Matter's look was the only one that I liked. I thought the other glamour looks were just kind of basic, so I would give Gray Matter fucking glamour as well. Now, despite my opinion, Asia Consent won, and yeah, I'm not upset at all. She's a fellow Dead by Daylight fan, and we gotta look out for each other. No, but for real, I said these are my favorite 3, so I didn't really care who won, but I think judging by the last floor show alone, I would have given the 1 to Gray Matter. I mean, look at what Gray Matter wore to the crowning. Overall, I give this episode yet another 6 out of 10. And with all the episode scores calculated, this season is also a 5 out of 10. And I think it could have been a 6 had it won over the fans of Dead by Daylight a little more. Yeah, 5 out of 10. This brings the year score to a whopping 5.9 out of 10. So I watched seasons 1 through 7 a while ago, but I picked the show back up because Episode 1. I don't know why I stopped watching the show, to be honest with you. I actually really enjoyed it, is what I wrote in my episode 1 notes, but we'll come back to this. In this episode, they go to war with the Saviors, and why not shoot them right now? Like, they're not there to negotiate. If anything, Negan is just there to intimidate. Like, if they shot Negan the moment he walked out defenseless, his reveal of having the Hilltop guy wouldn't have even been a potential threat. Either way, I gave the episode a 6 out of 10. Episode 2, I like Morgan. He's a badass, but something he said in this episode made me laugh out loud.
I don't die.
Yeah, man. Neither do I. Neither does anybody that hasn't died yet. I mean, this is such a stupid line, dude. And it's like a piece of his identity. In this episode, Jesus, true to his name, is being very pacifistic and sparing a bunch of survivors, and I found this to be terribly frustrating. I mean, you can say what you will about the group's surrender, but realistically, they have to be moved and fed and held prisoner until they can be trusted, and then you still run the risk of retaliation. And on top of that, we know the guy in the closet is a huge piece of shit, and the world would be better without him. So sparing him is just borderline stupid, and they continue with this pacifism shit throughout the whole season. I still gave this episode a 6 out of 10. In episode 3, I don't have much to say about it, but I also gave it a 6 out of 10. And episode 4, not unique to this episode, but I just want to say that the cinematography is amazing. Something also not unique to this episode, last minute saves. Predictable, corny, lazy, and in abundance. I wish they were used more sparingly throughout the show, but they're not. Anyway, it gets 6 out of 10. Episode 5. So this episode is where Gabriel and Negan are in a trailer together. And why doesn't Gabe shoot Negan? He could have. But obviously he's, doing pastor shit or whatever. We saw him wield a fucking gun and shoot it. He has a gun. No reason not to shoot Negan. He could have held the gun to his head, then gave the confession, saved his soul or whatever, then fucking shot him, dude. And it's mentioned a lot in this episode that Rick is getting his group killed. It's mentioned by Negan. It's mentioned by Mr. Roadkill here. But it is the most brain-dead logic in the world. The argument is that due to Rick's actions of retaliation, he's causing the consequence of people dying. But if you take one itsy bitsy step back, you can see that the actions of the saviors causes the consequences of retaliation. You don't get to be an authoritarian gang of assholes and then turn around and say, you guys are just as bad when war breaks out. And my problem with this episode, and the same problem I had with Jesus' spontaneous act of pacifism, is the proper counter arguments are not presented. Nobody talks to these characters like I talk to my screen. The show tries to prop up these naive black and white moral fallacies as valid, and it's fucking frustrating. And I give this episode a 5 out of 10. Episode 6. This has more of that black and white pacifism versus the cold-blooded murder rhetoric, and it's by far the worst thing about this season so far. And one little moment specifically that really pisses me off is the moment where this asshole prisoner Jared tries to get away. When he's stopped, he says, "You're gonna get these people killed." And then you have another guy in contrast thank Maggie for sparing them, and it's a moment to show, see, they're not all bad, but okay, as if they're not two completely different people. I don't know why we gotta act like the fucking prisoners are just like this one entity. Like, you can separate them. You can kill the bad ones and spare the good ones. Like, what is stopping them from killing Jared? He's a psychopath. Full stop. Why waste food on him? Why risk him getting out? He serves no purpose to the community, and he's a risk. There's no reason not to shoot him right there. And it's not a fair argument to say not all prisoners are bad when nobody's calling for killing all of them. There were a couple other things that bothered me about this episode. I mean, Rick's insanely stupid plan to try and reason with the garbage people. It's incredibly risky. It's stupid. I hate it. And then Carl and this random dude nearly dying over some dead lady's superstitions. And I mean, we'll get back to that. Trust me. And that's a 4 out of 10. Episode 7. And don't get me started with Eugene. Eugene is such an incredibly annoying character. I don't know why he talks like that. It sucks so bad. It's painful to hear. And then Dwight not shooting Eugene was also fucking dumb. I don't know why the characters act so fucking dumb, dude. And Eugene has a redemption arc later, and that's why he's like spared and like, oh, we have had faith in Eugene's conscience and all that stupid shit. But like, to be honest, if people just fucking shot people, when they had the chance, this season would have ended a lot sooner, and the good guys would have come out on top if people would just fucking shoot people. I'm getting it a 2 out of 10. Episode 8. Outside of the frustrating fact that the saviors got out, this episode was actually pretty decent compared to the last couple, although that ending was fucked up. And we'll get to that. Episode 9. I have a million different nitpicks with this episode, but let's talk about the big one, alright? Carl dying. Fuck you. Like, turns out that Chandler Riggs, the actor that played Carl, actually bought a fucking house and put school on hold to film this fucking show just for them to just cut him off like this. God, I don't know. This episode sucked. It's a fucking 3 out of 10. Episode 10, 5 out of 10. We're just gonna fucking quick fire this. All right, I don't have time to talk about why this show sucks. Episode 11, also a 5 out of 10. Episode 12, oh yeah, this is where fucking Negan escapes Rick's grasp because Rick decides to make the dumbest fucking decisions possible, including wasting all of his fucking bullets. 5 out of 10. Episode 13, yeah, that's a 4 out of 10. Episode 14, oh, and then this is that episode where Rick murders a bunch of saviors that are clearly on his side and ready to assimilate to Hilltop, and that really irks me. Goes directly against his dead son's wishes and against his character, and it's not even practical. So yeah, this episode sucked as well. I mean, the rest of the episode was alright, but this moment sucked, and it's a 5 out of 10. Episode 15 is another episode of why didn't they just shoot him? That's getting a 4 out of 10. Episode 16. This episode wasn't all bad, but sparing Negan just sucks. And what the fuck was Maggie, Jesus, and Daryl, where they were all like plotting against Rick at the end? That was totally fucking lame. This season as a whole just reminded me why I stopped watching the show. The writing fell off, dude. The writing fell off hardcore. And I mean, there's so many episodes in this season which are just boring filler and ridiculous plot armor, and I just can't finish this show. And you know what? I know, just by looking at like a few of the later shows, I just know that Negan gets a redemption arc, and he doesn't deserve it. He does not deserve it. You want to fucking kill off Carl and then give Negan a redemption arc? This show just sucks now, dude. This show just sucks. And with all the scores calculated, this show ends up being a fucking a 5 out of 10, and that's being merciful, dude. That is a merciful score. This brings the year score to a 5.87. Episode 1. So this episode is great as always, but it didn't really grab me the same way that season 2 did. Like, it wasn't as good. Like, it was good, but it wasn't as good. For starters, it was already hard to believe that a detective didn't think that the boatman was evil. I mean, from the moment he was introduced, my first thought was, okay, so he just happened to be in the right place in the right time to save him? Sure. But to not only not piece it together, but to just outright reject the theory that he could be evil is by far the weakest part of this episode. And it obviously could have saved the characters a lot of everything, to be honest. And also, I know it's just episode 1, but Gi Hun's mopey arc is a lot less interesting than his rebellious arc. And overall, this episode is a good start, but not as good as a start as the first 2 seasons, and it made me worry about the quality of the rest of the season, and I was right to be worried. Easily the best part of this episode was Soldier 11. I liked her whole story. She's definitely a positive for this season as a whole. This episode gets a 7 out of 10. Episode 2. I knew 120 was gonna die the moment she stepped back from the exit, but at least she got some badassery in beforehand. But I don't know, the moment did not hit as hard as it should have. Her death was just too unceremonious. However, James Bond over here, his death hit hard. It hit so hard that I was actually crying. And as the credits started rolling, I thought I should take a picture of myself right now to show you guys how hard I'm crying. But then I started laughing when I saw myself in the camera, so here's the photo I got. Also, 44 died, and thank fuck, dude. Holy shit, she was annoying. Anyway, for the episode as a whole, that last scene hit hard enough to move this episode from a high 7 to a low 9. So yeah, it's getting a 9 out of 10, and it's easily the best episode of this season. The game, the hide and seek shit was really intense, but it's downhill from here. Episode 3. This episode was good. Not much to say about it, really. This episode ended with the jump rope, and the old lady hanged herself. But like episode 1, it's just not really the same quality that I know the show can bring. It's a 7 out of 10. Episode 4. I don't know why 222 would jump to her death. It would be far less painful to let the guard shoot you, but yeah, she dies. The Captain Park scene was cool, but the rest of the episode was actually kind of boring. Not like actually boring, but like relative to Squid Game. I'm kind of sounding like a broken record here, but like this season just is not up to its typical quality. And let's just wrap it up. We'll just fucking squish episode 5 and 6 together here, because without diving into any specifics, I mean, this show just has a lot of plot lines that go nowhere, and this is not a critique unique to me. A lot of people have been saying this show should not have wrapped up as quickly as it did. Or like, they could have stopped at season 1, obviously, everybody knows that. But I thought season 2 was actually really good, as you guys know. But season 3, it just felt rushed. It should have been longer if it was going to exist. And Ji-hoon's sacrifice, like, I liked that scene. I liked that moment. I did not like how it got there. How it got there was just so sloppy. I mean, I'm gonna give the 5th episode a 6 and the 6th episode a 7, but like, this show isn't bad, but it's worse than bad. It's disappointing. And with all the scores calculated, this one's just getting a 7 out of 10, and that brings the year score to a 5.91. Typically, I find Superman to be a rather boring character, but making him kind of like a sensitive wuss was actually a pretty good way of making him interesting. He's got like this macho set of superpowers, but then to have him just be like kind of wimpy was just really good. I like that. And overall, I like the movie. It was good, except, I mean, there was that scene where Superman turns himself into Luthor, and it makes no sense. I mean, why doesn't he just smash the glass before the kryptonite scene? Why doesn't the elemental guy hear him out when the only thing stopping Superman is a thin piece of glass? And lastly, how come genius Lex Luthor didn't think about any of this? He didn't think about any of it. He doesn't keep the baby in like a different area. He doesn't like have Superman proof glass, or like he doesn't have the kryptonite as soon as Superman shows up. Like, I don't know. It just seems like a very poorly thought out scene. And why didn't he just have him killed right there. He could have killed Superman right there. This moment really grinded my gears. It really ruffled my feathers. Also, the first half of this movie just had a lot of info dumping, and the dialogue in general was just a little shabby in this movie. Like, I was not a fan of that. And I did run to the bathroom a total of 5 times during the movie due to the Pepsi I was slurping down. So forgive me if this last nitpick is straight up wrong, but I wish things were set up a little better. I mean, just a couple examples of this. I wish that the elemental guy was seen before the prison scene. I wish that that bus that hit the Superman clone was like more noticeably present, because it kind of just seemed like it came out of nowhere so that Superman could end the final fight. I just wish this movie was a little more thought out is all. But I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. The year score stays at a 5.91 out of 10.
Well, you can't tell by the way I use my walk. I'm a woman's man, no time to talk. Music loud, women walk, being kicked around since I was born.
So the reason I watched this film is it's like one of those movies that everybody recommends you see. You know, it's one of those movies where people say, how do you like movies, but you haven't seen... and then enter any movie ever, and it's like, how haven't you seen this movie? Like, dude, I was born probably later than you, alright? I've got a lot of shit to catch up on, and movies are coming out every fucking year, dude. My watch list is huge, alright? I don't have time to watch every goddamn movie that fucking film buffs supposedly like. I'm sorry, that was I'm digressing. That's why I'm watching this movie, is because it's one of those movies that are just like a must watch. I have a little issue with spoof movies. They're a little weird for me. I don't dislike spoof films as a genre, like how I dislike coming of age films. Like, spoofs aren't like that, but I also don't really like spoofs as a genre. I think a lot of them are okay, but it's like really hard for me to love a spoof film, and that's because of their lack of substance. I mean, spoof films are inherently stunted in terms of stakes and attachment. For example, to drive this point home, I would have not given half a shit if the two main characters actually got together in the end, or if the plane actually landed. Like, all of these plots and characters are just set up for a punchline. The only stakes of this movie are if the punchline is funny or not. And the only spoof films that I love that come to mind are like the Austin Powers trilogy and Monty Python's Life of Brian or Meaning of Life. And the Meaning of Life can kind of get away with it because it's just like a series of skits. There's not like an actual through plot line. But why do the other two examples work? Life of Brian, you get attached to Brian. Maybe not any of the other characters, but Brian's story and arc is one of substance. And Austin Powers especially, while filled to the brim with jokes, it does not sacrifice its substance or stakes for a punchline. Rather, the film takes its ridiculous characters somewhat seriously, and that's the brilliance of it. It features the most outlandish cast of heroes, villains, and hijinks, but it's believable. It sets up the world and has you believe it before it delivers the punchlines. And I say all this because Airplane doesn't do this. Airplane is just one big skit, and this prevents me from loving it. But here's the more important question, is it funny? Here's the other issue with spoof films before I answer that. They often feature back-to-back jokes. So the audience is constantly expecting a joke, and when your audience is expecting a joke, you have to get really clever with breaking those expectations. And does Airplane do this? Sometimes. It does it sometimes. I laughed a lot at some of its jokes, but I'd say the hit rate for me was probably only like a quarter of the time. Like, I probably only laughed about a quarter of the jokes. And mind you, this movie has a lot of jokes in it, so a quarter of the time is a good deal of the film. But when it's like, go, 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 and there's no time to let the plot breathe, I begin to look at the scene like, what's the joke gonna be? And unless the joke was really good, it just falls short. And that all being said, it's fine for what it is, and I'll be giving it a low 6 out of 10. Like, it's funny sometimes. The year score is gonna stay at a 5.91 out of 10.
I'm going down south, I'm gonna have myself a time.
Friendly faces everywhere, humble folks without temptation.
Okay, so usually I do this by 5 movies or seasons at a time, but this time I have 8 on my backlog, so I'm going to do the next 8 pretty speedily. That includes this one that I've already played the intro for, which is South Park Season 27, and this is why I was caught off guard, because this season ended so abruptly. But yeah, I mean, let's just get into it. Episode 1, I guess to start, I'm a huge fan of South Park, by the way. I suppose that's probably relevant. I love South Park, so this is definitely all in a positive light. I've watched up to Season 27 at this point, so. The first episode, it wasn't as clever as South Park typically is. Obviously, it made big controversy, because this is like the first Trump episode they did, and I'm all for that. I do want to say that I actually loved Cartman and Butters' B story. I mean, Trey Parker himself stated in one of his commentaries that his favorite episodes are the ones that are like kid-centric, you know, part of like the kids doing the kids stuff, as opposed to like the town being the center of the episodes, and that's kind of why I feel South Park has fallen off in the more recent seasons, because they don't focus on the kids, they focus on the town, and I don't know, it's less of an appeal for me. But this episode is a 6 out of 10. And then episode 2, I just felt very similarly about this episode as well. It's still a 6 out of 10. Episode 3, so I don't remember the exact details of this episode, but what I wrote in my notes is that this episode is a little funnier than the last two. This is 7 out of 10. Episode 4, this was the little boo-boo episode. By far my favorite part of this episode was the city walk guy. It's getting a 7 out of 10 as well. Episode 5, this was actually my favorite episode of the season, and now the season's over, so holy smokes. This was the one about the online betting app, and then Kyle's mom and Palestine, you know, you get it. Anyway, that all being said, this episode is actually a 7 out of 10, and I like South Park. I fuck with it. Yeah, that's really it. Yep, this season ends up being a 7 out of 10. This brings the year score to a 5.94 out of 10. This is the first time I'm going to do this. I'm going to lump some episodes together because, for the most part, this show is the same for me. Every episode is just like, it's funny, it's good, it's well written, but it's not like super insane. It's not like this masterpiece of art. It's just this really fun show to watch. You know, it's nothing more than that. So here is a list of all the episodes that are getting a 6 out of 10. So every episode, for the most part, is a 6 out of 10. I am, however, going to pick episodes that stood out to me for good or bad reasons, and this is probably not the last time I'm going to do this for a show, but this is the first time, so we are going to start with episode 2. So this episode was not as funny. I mean, it was still kind of funny, but it wasn't that funny. And then and I wrote in my notes here that something bothered me about this episode, but I forgot what it was, so I know that doesn't really help anything. I was watching this with somebody, so I wasn't like sitting there taking notes like I usually do. This episode ended up being a 5 out of 10. And then episode 4, so this episode made me feel bad for this nerd kid, and the teacher dude, he's supposed to be a dick, but he was like provided with an opportunity for character growth, and they sort of gave it to him, but they didn't fully give it to him. He's still just as unlikable at the end of the episode, and this irked me because this could have been the moment where he was like, okay, I can actually like the main character. He's not just some dick, but he ends up being just some dick at the end of this episode. So this episode, it's a 3 out of 10. So unsurprisingly, this show ends up actually being a 6 out of 10. This brings the year score to a 5.95 out of 10. So, despite a minor nitpick I had with this movie that spawned an hour-long argument with some friends of mine, the ones that showed me this film, that ended with the conclusion that art is subjective, this movie was pretty good. And in case you're curious, my argument is that Lady Ishiba should have had a scene of reflection before the sudden change of heart at the end, because she literally goes from killing a god and getting her arm eaten to deciding to be a good person. I just feel like there needed to be a moment there to justify the sudden change in character, but you know, aside from that little nitpick, I thought this movie was good. You know, the animation's good, the music's good, the story is unique and cool as shit. It ends up being a 7 out of 10. And that brings the year score to a 5.97 out of 10.
Well, if you want to sing out, sing out. And if you want to be free, be free. There's a million things to be.
Okay, this is one of those movies that I just got sucked into and I was like so absorbed in, and this movie is just phenomenal. I actually really, really like this movie. It's such a, I don't know, it's such a beautifully well-told story about attachment and other things, but I don't know, dude. This is such a beautiful movie. I don't really know what to say about this movie. It didn't fundamentally change me as a person or anything, but like it is definitely underrated. This movie ends up being an 8 out of 10. This brings the year score up to a 6, a 6.02 if you want to get specific. Much like Harold and Maude, I don't really know what to say about this movie. I enjoyed watching it. It's a stupid movie, I will say that. Ironically, I know that Happy Gilmore 2 came out this year, and that should be the movie I'm reviewing for my 2025 review, but I just saw this movie. It's been on my watch list forever. It just came up. Happy Gilmore 2's timing was coincidental, and I probably won't get to Happy Gilmore 2 because even though I enjoyed this movie, like, it was good, it's not that good. Not something I'd rewatch. It's a 6 out of 10. This brings the year score absolutely nowhere. It's still at a 6.02 out of 10. Alright, once again, another anime that I'm watching because of Dead by Daylight. Although this time I was a bit excited because the cosmetic for this is actually really cool. I'm sure I'm showing it on screen right now, but it's literally a fucking bear with a cat on its head, so I enjoy that. And I heard that there was actually some Dead by Daylight representation in the show, so that also excited me. So I went to watch the show thinking, oh, it's a very original concept. Right off the bat, episode 1 and 2, they sucked. I also recommended this show to my coworker, if you're watching, hey Nick. And I said to him what I'm gonna say right now, and that this is a very niche show. This has a very specific target audience, and that is people that love cats, anime, and horror. And while I do love horror, and I like cats, I'm not a fan of anime, and I wouldn't call myself a cat lover. Like, that's not something I'd put in my fucking Instagram bio, so this show is just kind of cringy to me. And there was this joke, too, where they were like, saw this hole in the wall, and was like, no way the cat's gonna fit through there. And then the cat obviously does, and I thought that was really funny. But then they go on to explain that cats can fit through small holes, and I'm like, yeah, I know that. That was the joke. You didn't need to explain the joke to me. That just ruined it for me. And this show does that a lot. It just like over-explains itself, and it just kind of kills a lot of its jokes. The first 2 episodes get a 2 out of 10. Now, episode 3 through 7, as the characters start becoming more like characters, there's actually some stakes in the show, then they start becoming 3 out of 10s. Episode 8, this was the episode with the bear, and this episode was actually a lot funnier than the typical episode. I actually did find myself laughing a lot more at this episode than the typical episode, but it still ended up being a 4 out of 10, because it's still kind of cringy to me. And then episode 9 through 12, the rest of the episodes, those are all 3 out of 10s as well. And as far as the Dead by Daylight representation goes, there was a Dead by Daylight poster in one of the episodes. There was Dwight and Meg appeared in 3 different episodes, and I thought that was cool. But I definitely like what Dead by Daylight got from this show as opposed to what this show got from Dead by Daylight. Anyway, this show ends up being a 3 out of 10, unsurprisingly. And that brings the year back down to a 5.95 out of 10.
Even the street, there's no place on earth you're likely to miss her kiss.
Now, funny enough, I actually didn't even realize this movie was coming out, but I've been following this musical for a while now. So a while ago, I actually watched a low quality recording of the stage musical because the title Kiss of the Spider Woman kind of intrigued me, and I kind of wanted to know what it was about. And because that was low quality, I ended up watching the non-musical movie to kind of get a better understanding of the story. And I thought they were all right. I wouldn't consider myself a super fan, but I thought, it was interesting enough. The movie was maybe a bit on the boring side, but it's an interesting story. And then now we have the musical version as a movie, and suddenly I get the best of both worlds. I get the musical version, but I also get the high quality, and I was actually quite a fan of this. I actually enjoyed this. I didn't really like the main actor. I thought the acting was kind of flat. I felt like the only reason that this person was cast was because they could sing. On top of that, I also both liked and disliked the change of the story. From off the top of my head, the ending was different. The ending where Melina gets shot, that didn't happen in the original musical. I think that change was a good change. I think that was good. The change that I wasn't necessarily a fan of, but I also kind of was a fan of aspects of it, a good and bad change, and it's the same change is what I'm trying to say, is in the musical, Melina was talking about like 3 different movies, or I believe it was 3, it might have been less or more. In the film, she is talking about a single movie that is taking place. There's like a through plot line. And while I like the direction they went in the story and how it like kind of reflected what was actually happening, I kind of liked the aspect that Melina was actually watching Nazi propaganda films, and there was that sort of butting heads between Melina and the other guy. I should have looked up his name before I started recording. The dude with the beard. Overall, I think it's a very unique and charming film. I give it a 7 out of 10. This brings the year score to a 5.98 out of 10. Alright, this film is very gimmicky, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The cinematography was amazing. Hands down, incredible. And the actor, the dog, oh, he was a good boy. Like, he was great. I hope they weren't actually scaring the poor guy. It was believable. Get this dog an Oscar in the shape of a bone. And the story was also actually good. It's like a triple threat right here. The story of, like, the guy's grandpa, and then him and the dog being helpless to help his owner, and I don't know, it was really good, but here is the catch. Here's the catch. The movie was very boring. You can tell that they had a very small plot and they just had to thin it out. And it's not even that long of a movie. It's actually a pretty short movie, but they did not have enough plot. So the entire movie is just like, oh, the dog investigates some dark area, then something spooky happens. Then we see his owner being sick, and then it's daytime, and then we get some boring scenes because it's daytime and nothing happens. Then rinse and repeat. And that's most of the movie. And I really, really wanted to like this movie, but like I was damn near falling asleep in the theater because of how just drawn out this film felt. And because of that, I had to give it a 5 out of 10. A 5 out of 10 that hurts my soul, to be honest. And this leaves the year score at a 5.95 out of 10.
All it all was just a brick in the wall.
I got fired just in time to catch the next show on a black phone too. I love not having a job. So I might have mentioned this earlier this year, but I have dubbed Blumhouse the king of concepts, but the jester of execution, and both Black Phone movies qualify for this. I mean, the concept is incredible. Maybe should steer away from ripping off A Nightmare on Elm Street a little bit, but for the most part, it's unique. Visually, I love the look of the movie, especially when it does like that grainy effect. That's really cool. And the villain is a good blueprint for a villain, but he falls just short of iconic, despite what a mass amount of marketing wants you to think. He's just kind of missing that it factor, bro. The dialogue in this film is incredibly weak, and the acting is somehow even worse. And my god, does this movie not subvert any expectation at all? And I'm not saying it needs some mind-blowing twist, but like, all of the answers are given to you right after the question's been asked. Here's a minor nitpick. At the end of the movie when the mother calls, which by the way is completely unnecessary, but at the end when the mother calls from beyond the grave, and she's all like, tell your brother I love him. What about the dad? She doesn't mention the dad at all, which is just super fucked, considering that he felt responsible for her apparent suicide. I mean, that's just kind of fucked, man. That's like, I don't know why that was left out of the script. But also, there's another pro outside of the grainy effect that I liked in the look of the movie. I love the fucked up imagery. And what I mean by that is I liked the kids that were dead. I liked seeing the kids get chopped up. I might have also said this earlier in the video, but I applaud horror media that isn't afraid to kill children, and this movie takes that shit to another level. This might not be a horror movie I can say I liked, but this is a horror movie I can say disturbed me, and it's definitely getting some good points for that. This movie ends up being a 5 out of 10. This brings the year score to a 5.93 out of 10. I don't know how many more Dead by Daylight bits I can do. I've watched a lot for this fucking game, and the amount of anime that I've been watching for this fucking game is painful. Now, this was actually because they re-released the Attack on Titan collection, but I will say, the Armored Titan and the Warhammer Titan cosmetics, I've been wanting them because they're the only killers per se that I haven't unlocked. Like, obviously I have the Oni and the Spirit, but like I also have all the cosmetics that turn the characters into different characters except for these two. So when the Attack on Titan collection came back, I was actually more excited than I was dreading watching the show, because now my collection's complete. But then I had to watch this show. Once again, I'm going to be lumping episodes together, but I'm going to do it in chronological order this time, starting with episode 1 through 6. And this is where I thought, wait, this shit's actually good? Wait, I actually kind of like this shit? Damn. I feel the weeb taking over me like I'm Venom. I actually found an anime that I like, and I never thought I'd see the day. And I'm honestly a little embarrassed. I'm a little ashamed. I'm giving this season's first 6 episodes a 6 out of 10. And that brings us to episode 7. And this episode was kind of badass. It had some very good characterization for Mikasa. I really appreciated that. It's getting a 7 out of 10. Then episode 8 is back down to a 6 out of 10. Episode 9. So this episode was a small dip in quality. For starters, the scene with Eren in the Titan's stomach did not need to be as long as it was. We get nothing new out of Eren's character through his inner monologue or the flashbacks. It just drags on the episode. Then his inner monologue gets even more frustrating when he's being asked questions from that one dude, like, why doesn't he just fucking talk? Just say what he's thinking. It's so redundant. Not to mention that one dude that was barking shit also was really annoying. And then you had this other random chick add literally nothing of substance just to fill more screen time. Like, the interrogation was completely arbitrary if he was going to kill them regardless of anything Eren says. Or when some lackey mentions that they can't really risk losing Mikasa, but that does nothing to influence his decision. It really just felt like a filler episode with like sprinkles of relevance, you know? It did not need to be a whole episode. It's a 4 out of 10. Episode 10. This episode was just also not as good as the typical episode. It starts where the last episode ends, so that doesn't really help, but you know, I don't have nearly as many problems with this one as I did the last one, but it's a 5 out of 10. Episode 11 through 16, there was a tad bit of cringe in episode 13, but all these episodes get the usual score, 6 out of 10. But then episodes 17 and 18, so these are the episodes with the super dangerous female Titan, and right off the bat, I already knew this was Annie. I saw the blonde hair, and I'm like, well, that's obviously Annie. So there's that. But that doesn't stop this episode, or these episodes, from actually being kind of good and awesome. And I'm giving them 7 out of 10s because they were cool. Episode 19. Now, this episode was honestly full of cringe and incohesive points. Like, trusting your teammates despite them being untrusting. Like, I don't know. This episode just actually made no fucking sense at all, and it was cringy. So, I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. Episode 20 is the usual 6 out of 10. Then episode 21. This episode also kind of rocked. This was the Titan fight episode where they fucking fight each other, and that's really cool. Now, once again, I can go without Eren's inner monologue. I think he needs to just keep those thoughts to himself, to be honest. But yeah, I thought this episode was cool. 7 out of 10. Then episode 20 through to 25 get the usual 6 out of 10. This show is the first official anime that I like. And the first unofficial anime that I like. I don't know what's supposed to be official or unofficial. Those are just the words that came out of my fat gabber. So anyway, with all the scores calculated, this show ends up being a 6 out of 10. And the year score is staying at a 5.93 out of 10.
Pick poor Robin clean. Pick poor Robin clean. Pick his head, I pick his feet.
Alright, I like this movie. I think it was good. But it kind of seemed like two different movies. It was like this really cool drama, then it became a vampire movie, kind of out of the blue. But I don't know. I think it was cool. I thought it was a good movie. I gotta say, being a vampire looked awesome. I know that I'm not supposed to think that. I'm very aware of that, but like, come on. This is what it was like to be in that club. And this is what it looks like to be in this club. I don't know, dude. I might have stepped outside. Anyway, yeah, this movie fucking ruled. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. That brings the year score to a 5.98 out of 10. I think the default of Attack on Titan is still going to be a 6 out of 10. So these are all the episodes that got 6s out of 10s. And we're going to talk about episode 1. So the Talking Titan was pretty cool. I wish the dude asked it more questions instead of doing absolutely nothing at all. Overall, a solid episode. Episode 2, this episode on the other hand, was filled to the brim with cringe. Most, but not all, of said cringe stems from Sasha, who I think is a relatively cringe character in general. And because of that, this episode gets a 3 out of 10. Episode 6. Okay. The bomb of Rhina and Bertold being the armored and colossal titans just being casually dropped along with the motive of humanity's extinction had me so fucking baffled. This could not have been the best way to reveal this. Like, it was just so unceremonious. And like, right now, as I'm recording this, I've already finished the series. But at the time, I was also just so fucking confused, and they don't give you like a scrap of something that makes sense out of it. And like, again, while in hindsight a lot of the show makes sense, and that's kind of like how it's supposed to unravel, I still stand by the fact that this twist was just done so fucking poorly. Definitely not good. I also got another small nitpick here. Okay, so Eren defending Rhina and Bertold when they're like find out makes his character seem so fucking stagnant. He defended Annie when the evidence was against her, found out Annie was in fact guilty, and now he's doing the same shit, like the same exact shit. It is so annoying, to say the least. This was a bad fucking character decision. So yeah, this episode kind of sucked cock, and that's all I got to say, I guess. 2 out of 10. So episode 7, I just wrote that this was pretty epic. It had an awesome fight scene in it. So yeah, this is getting a 7 out of 10. Episode 8. So if you were very observant, you might notice that this episode was in the lump of episodes that got a 6 out of 10. But I just have to say that scene where Armin and Mikasa aggressively eat food might be the cringiest thing I've seen from this show. And I just needed to say that and get that off my chest. I mean, the episode is still a 6 out of 10, but holy fuck, dude. Episode 9. Okay, so the following is what I felt still watching season 2. I took the notes while I was watching season 2, so I was still ignorant to the wider story. I basically said that I understand the building mystery and everything, but all this confusion with absolutely zero answers and an entire episode without even a breadcrumb of it fucking sucks. It's like they left us on a cliffhanger and they had us hanging on that cliff for an entire fucking episode after, and I still think that point stands. Like, this entire episode was just there to confuse. Like, this is like only an episode that you can enjoy if you're rewatching the show, and while that has merit to it, as a first time watch, I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. This season ended up being a 5.5 out of 10, so the ball is in my court on how I feel about it. Here are some pros and cons. Starting with the cons, I feel like this season was filler. It danced around revealing answers even when it doesn't make sense for the characters not to explain. Like, it didn't even have like a moment where like the characters talk about it and then it happens off screen and we, the audience, aren't privy to something. It's just bad character-wise, motive-wise. The whole people turning into Titans thing was so obvious, but it literally took until the end of the season for the characters to come to that conclusion. For the amount of time I spent watching this season, we've barely progressed in the story at all. None of the questions from season 1 outside of identities of Armored and Colossal Titan have been answered. We don't have any motives, we don't understand Eren's abilities or where they came from, and we don't see what's in his father's cellar. This whole episode was just painful from an ignorant standpoint. On the other hand, the substance that this season did have was rather good. I mean, the Monkey Titan was cool, a great villain. Eren and Mikasa really shined through in this season. The revenge of the Smiling Titan reached a satisfying conclusion. Ymir's backstory was pretty well written, especially in hindsight. So it's honestly very hard to say whether I want to give it a 5 or a 6, but ultimately, I think the cons outweigh the pros, and I'm going to go ahead and give this season a 5 out of 10. That brings the year score to a 5.96. Say something that I haven't mentioned yet about this show, and I want to applaud this show for having so many unique, conflicting characters that I enjoy and am attached to. I mean, this show has most shows beat for the sheer volume of characters I like to see on screen. And at this point, the default rating for an episode goes from 6 to 8 out of 10. A lot of these episodes are 8s out of 10s, so here's the list of all the episodes that are 8 out of 10s, and then we'll talk about the others. Episode 1 was a 7 out of 10. I thought it was a solid opening. And then we get into what makes this season better, which is the outlawed scout storyline. I was such a fan of this storyline, even though it moved away from Titans, which are like kind of the appeal of the show. It has like the scouts get closer as like a group of people. They bond. I don't know, dude. I just fuck with it heavy, to be honest with you guys. But episode 6, this episode is cringe. This show is, as much as it is the exception to my I don't like anime rule, it still has some of those little things that just make me go, ew, you know? This cringe is like mostly a bunch of little things. I can't point to any specific scene here. It is like an overall bad episode. There's info dumping, cringy dialogue, lazy writing. I could spend the entirety of this episode going through it and just going, that right there, that made me cringe. That right there, that made me cringe. But you know, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say this episode's a 4 out of 10 because I cringed a lot in it. Episode 9. This episode was a 6 out of 10. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was as good as the majority of episodes in this. And I feel the same way about episode 11, although episode 11 got a 7 out of 10. And then episode 12 through 15 are the same. It's 6 out of 10. Now, I didn't actually take notes on these episodes. I just I knew at this point in time I was lumping episodes together, so I just lumped these all into one big thing. So I can't get into the specifics of why. But then episodes 16 through 17, it's back up to 8 out of 10s, which you know because I put in the beginning of the fucking thing. But this is when the scouts are all on the wall and they're all trapped. I think this was such a fucking phenomenal moment. It happened over the span of a few episodes, so it's not like a moment, but like I enjoyed this storyline. This was really good. But episode 18 comes along, and well, first of all, it pisses me off that they could have killed all 3 Titans in a single episode. They could have killed Armored Titan, they could have killed the Beast Titan, and they could have killed the Colossal Titan, all in a single episode. And again, now knowing what I know about, I understand that they needed these characters alive, but they should have given better reasons. And you know what? I would even have let it slide with the Beast Titan if the Armored Titan also died, like if they killed 2 of the 3 Titans at least. And like ultimately I'm glad that these Titans didn't die. I just think that it was like such a contrived way of doing it. They should have just not have put the characters in that position to begin with. That being said, the moral dilemma between Armin and Erwin was actually quite the opposite in terms of writing. It was a tough decision. It was great. I loved seeing that. So despite my blood boiling over them not killing Rhino, which upsets me greatly, I can't give this episode anything lower than a 7 out of 10, and that's what I got. Episode 19, snooze alert. This episode was boring. It's a 5 out of 10. And then episode 20 through 22 are 7 out of 10s to me. With all the scores calculated, this season ends up being a 7 out of 10. That brings the year score back up to a 5.98 out of 10. Okay, so most of these episodes are also 8 out of 10s. So the first 2 episodes were a very rough start for me. These episodes are like showing us what's happening in Marley, and while I understand why they're showing it, and I would be totally fine with it conceptually or on paper, I found these episodes kind of stale and uninteresting, and the reason is because there's no single voice of reason. Everybody here is drinking the Marley Kool-Aid, even Rhina, and I just feel like I'm watching propaganda. In hindsight, especially, I understand why, but my experience watching these episodes is not good, and I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. But episode 3 and 4, this is when it starts ramping up. But these episodes are a lot more interesting because we actually see the other side of the events that unfolded. We actually get to see the scout regiment from the perspective of Bertold, Rhina, and Annie. I actually like these a lot more, and they're getting 6 out of 10s. Now, episodes 6 and 7, now these episodes were badass. And I mean, these blow it out of the fucking water. Like, it was such an epic reunion, and it's truly poetic the way that Eren becomes the evil titan that harms civilians. Like, I was literally jumping out of my seat with excitement about everything that was unfolding, seeing the scouts just kick ass. I mean, and I know they're playing the bad guy, but it's just so awesome to see them winning like this, going from like clueless to the top of the food chain. It was such an incredible conclusion. They're getting 9 out of 10s. Episode 15, this is just a 6 out of 10 to me. So this is when like the excitement starts ramping down a little bit. Still a good episode. But then episode 21, another episode that got me bouncing around like a kid on his way to Disneyland. It just has so many arcs that come to such a poetic conclusion and a nice little bow. This episode was just so well crafted. It's getting a 9 out of 10. Episode 23, I know this was a tiny scene, but the scene where Annie was eating the pie as Armin and Connie just so happened to be talking about her was so goddamn cringe. It actually made me like this episode significantly less, and it's getting a 6 out of 10. And before I move on, I also want to talk about Annie a little bit. I know that like we're reaching this point in time where we're like, okay, you know, Annie isn't like the terrible person that we thought she was in the first season, where she's like the enemy and how we're coming to understand each other and all that. And like, you know, part of me thinks, yeah, I get it. But I don't forgive Annie necessarily, because if you look back at that first episode where she's the female Titan, like look at the way she's like fucking with the scouts, like the way she like fucking throws it. Like it's not, she doesn't give them all quick deaths, you know? She's taking sadistic pleasure in it. And I just think to treat her like she's just like this misunderstood anti-hero is like, I don't know, dude. She needs a lot more atoning, in my opinion. Episode 24, it starts ramping back up. This gets a 7 out of 10. It's not quite there yet. This is a transition transitional period. And then the final episode, an hour and a half long. Wow. Holy shit. What a depressing, poetic, and beautiful ending. This really got me all in my feels. And I mean, I just want to say, for the season as a whole, I mean, what a genius idea to have the protagonist of the first 3 seasons become the antagonist for the final one. Like, that is such a fucking awesome move. Powerful, dude. It makes it all worth it. One of the best fucking conclusions I've seen for a show. It's getting a 10 out of 10. So this season as a whole ends up being an 8 out of 10. That brings the year score up to a 6.02 out of 10. So I just want to say that they put their money to work in this movie. I mean, visually, this movie looks phenomenal. It's gorgeous. But I do have to say, I was a big fan of the first movie. I did not like this one as much. There were a few scenes that just felt a little contrived with like really easy fixes. Just one example, when Nessa wheels her way over to the book of magic, you know, the magic book with all the magic in it, both Elphaba and Flock had plenty of time to stop her, but they just were all like, no, don't do that, stop. And if they just if they changed this scene just a little bit, just to put the book closer to Nessa, like if they put the book in front of her, that would have given them no time to stop her, and it would just make the scene 1,000 times more believable with just that little fix. And there are just a lot of moments like this, and it's really hard to keep my belief suspended when it's just constantly being under attack. However, although not as good as the first one, I still thoroughly enjoyed my experience, and I'm still going to give this film an 8 out of 10. That brings the year score up to a 6.06 out of 10.
I'm Richter Belmont, the vampire hunter.
Alright, let's just jump into this. So most of these episodes for me was a 5 out of 10. This show is a little flat. I liked the first Castlevania show. This one is a notable step down in quality. So these are the episodes that got a different score. Episode 1 I gave a 6 out of 10 to. I really enjoyed the chemistry between Richter and Maria. Their dynamic in this episode was so good. And then we don't see that throughout the entire rest of the series. The dynamic they had here, we only see a fraction of that stretched out across the remaining episodes. Episode 4, so there I was, eating my dinner, and then bam! 2 naked men. This episode was a little more interesting. It's getting a 6 out of 10. And then episodes 6 and 7, this is when they're trying to blot out the sun like they did in Skyrim. The show just falls even flatter here. It's just, I don't know, it's just more boring. It just sucks, kind of. They're getting a 4 out of 10. In episode 8, this was also going to be a 5 out of 10, but those rat bastards threw in Alucard last second. And now I have no choice but to be excited for the second season. This episode got a 6 out of 10 for that alone. Overall, this show is like pretty shallow. I'm not a huge fan of it. It's not like overtly terrible, but compared to the first Castlevania show, it's not good. This show ends up being a 5 out of 10. That brings the year score down to a 6.04 out of 10. Alright, so, I mean, outside of Alucard's involvement, this entire season is just another 5 out of 10. For every scene that Alucard is in is good, but he's obviously not the protagonist, so here are all the episodes that get 5s out of 10s, and then let's break down the episodes that don't. Episode 4, so I think the scene where Maria confronts the abbot is cool, but then Juiced Prunes Belmont comes along and utters that stupid talking point that I fucking despise. No, Maria, you're supposed to use your powers for good. That's what she's doing. Using your powers for good means fighting evil. Taking out a Forge Master is literally 1 point for Team Good Guys. It should have been done a long time ago. This episode barely makes it out of the 5 range and gets a 6 out of 10 just because Maria carries this episode. And even though episode 5 did get a 5 out of 10, I just want to say that they fall back on that stupid talking point of killing the abbot was wrong, and they even get Maria to agree. So this episode would have been less than a 5 out of 10 if it wasn't for Alucard's badassery. And also, side note, Richter and Annette have like fucking zero chemistry. Episode 7. Okay, this episode is pretty cool. It's just one giant fight scene, and that's pretty cool. However, I want to say the fight with that night creature that had like a bunch of arms, like the one that they built up so much, that was so anticlimactic. They did not get enough screen time. Episode 8. In this episode, Annette almost died. But I knew she wouldn't, because even though her and Richter lack any chemistry at all, they're supposed to be together to have a kid and continue the Belmont family tree. And then the question came to me, what if a Belmont was gay? Would they fuck the opposite gender and have a kid anyway, to pass on the Belmont legacy? Then I thought, if I was a Belmont and I was gay, would I? Well, to answer that question, I must first assume that a gay guy fucking a girl would be like if a straight guy were to fuck a dude, right? And I have decided that if I was a Belmont, I would fuck a guy to carry on the bloodline. Anyway, this show has a nice conclusion and it's getting a 6 out of 10. But that doesn't save the season as a whole from being a 5 out of 10. And that brings the year score down to a 6.02 out of 10. So if you've watched the show, you will likely understand why I have no idea how to talk about it. The episodes are just short 10-minute doses of pure comedy. So I'm going to lump every episode, not just in this season, but every episode of Smiling Friends ever, as just an 8 out of 10. Because I thoroughly enjoy watching Smiling Friends, and that means this season is going to be an 8 out of 10. That brings the year score up to a 6.06 out of 10. So the first episode wasn't like particularly interesting. I thought it was fun. It's a 6 out of 10. Episode 2. Now I actually really enjoyed this episode a lot. I thought it was really funny. I especially liked the part where Rick is explaining the plan that's going wrong. That was pretty fucking genius. But I have a small nitpick. When Beth goes to assassinate her target in the beginning and finds out she's already dead, some of the guards walk into the room and one of them says, "Who are you? An assassin?" So that Beth can make the joke, "I wish." But like, who would even say that? What guard would come in and ask that question? It's such a lazy, contrived setup for a joke that's not even that good. I mean, it's a total nitpick. It's like a small scene in this episode, but it's genuinely just so cringeworthy. But overall, this episode gets an 8 out of 10. Episode 3 is a Citadel episode, which I fuck with heavy, 8 out of 10. Episode 4 was the Easter episode. It's a 6 out of 10. Episode 5, the Space Race Money episode. This one's a 7 out of 10. I was very conflicted on liking or loving this, and that's what a 7 out of 10 is for, baby. Episode 6, I don't even remember what this episode was, but I gave it an 8 out of 10 and called it epic. I'm gonna look it up right now. You hear my typing keyboard? I'm looking it up. Oh, I just typed in episode 6. I need to type in Rick and Morty so it knows what I'm talking about. Season 8 specifically. Oh, this is the one where they go to the world and then Beth clones herself. It's a pretty forgettable episode, but it's getting an 8 out of 10. Episode 7. So this episode was kind of lame. I typically like meta humor, but this episode just fell flat for me. And the Gunn and the Snyder cameos just kind of make it worse. Like, I'm not a huge fan of like celebrity inserts as themselves. I don't know. This episode kind of sucked, and it's getting a 4 out of 10. Episode 8 was the Jerry episode, and that shit was good, and it's an 8 out of 10. Episode 9. I just wrote this episode was fun. I also forget what that episode was. Here, let's get back to the keyboard, huh? Rick and Morty, season 8, episode 9. Morty Daddy. Oh, this is the... Okay, I remember this one. Yeah, this is the one where Morty talks with his son. Yeah, this is the episode where Morty thinks his son is dying and they go to Rick's trash can. That was pretty good. I like that episode. And it's getting a 7 out of 10. Episode 10, and this was a wonderful finale. I loved it. Rick and Morty... Season 8, episode 10. Yeah, of course. And this, obviously, if you didn't know, this was the episode with Memory Rick and Memory Beth. And yeah, I thought this was a pretty good episode, and it got an 8 out of 10. Anyway, this season ends up being a 7 out of 10, and that brings the year score to a 6.07 out of 10. Look, I'm not a die-hard FNAF fan. I don't watch hours worth of lore videos. I'm not terribly invested in it. I wouldn't consider myself a part of the community, but it was a core part of my childhood. I did grow up on the franchise, and I do definitely enjoy it. Sister Location was like the last game that I was like interested in before I just kind of fell off the franchise. But those first 5 games, I think it is, are somewhat near and dear to me. But I'm not gonna give this movie the sort of novelty points worst that the Minecraft movie gets. Let's just jump into the movie. So the first thing I want to say is the cinematography is fucking amazing. Like, they shot this movie so well. The best part about this movie, hands down, but the writing. Oh my god, dude. This movie seems like it has a good outline. Like, if you were to write down all the sequences, it flows into a nice story. But the dialogue is so abhorrent. It is probably, without exaggeration, the worst dialogue I've ever heard in a movie. And that's my problem with this movie, mostly. If I was a bit more invested in the franchise, I'd probably have a dozen more reasons to hate this movie. But, I mean, this movie has the look of a $36 to $51 million movie. But the script kind of seems like it was based off of a Wattpad fanfic. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. And that's gonna bring the year score down to a 6.04 out of 10. So I honestly was expecting to pace this show out until after 2025, but it was just so fucking good that I could not stop watching. So because I actually wasn't planning on putting this show in this video, I did not take notes on the individual episodes, but most of them are going to be 8 out of 10s, with the exception of episode 1, 6, and 8. So the first episode was kind of a slow burn for me. I wasn't actually interested in the show until the very end, when Omni-Man takes out the Guardians of the Globe. That is the scene that hooked me. But the rest of this episode was just kind of eh. But I do believe that was intentional, and it's still getting a 7 out of 10. Episode 6 was honestly pretty lame in comparison to other episodes. This is the one where they're on campus and then that weirdo starts turning people into cyborgs. For me, it just kind of felt really fucking boring. This episode was still alright, and it's getting a 6 out of 10. And then the last episode, the climax, episode 8, that was a fantastic climax. Again, I've said it before in this video, I'm a sucker for climaxes, so it's getting a 9 out of 10. I love this show, and in general, I just kind of love like darker, grittier superhero shit, and this is that. So with all the scores calculated, this season's an 8 out of 10, and that brings the year score to a 6.07 out of 10.
A Christian woman knows her place, so go ahead and punch me in the face, 'cause I deserve it. I was wrong. That's what.
Episode 1. So this episode was a really strong start for the season. From the Jesus storyline to the Peter Thiel songs to the Exorcist references to all the stupid, ridiculous 6-7 jokes, I think this is a very strong start. It was funny from a strong satirical standpoint, which is what I look for in South Park. So this episode gets an 8 out of 10. Episode 2. This episode actually commented on the criticism I had about the show's later seasons in my season 27 review, basically saying, South Park sucks now. There's not enough kids doing kids stuff. And again, as I pointed out, this was actually a sentiment that Trey Parker shared, so it's all in good fun. And this episode was just all around pretty fun, so I'm giving it another 8 out of 10. Episode 3, I like the AI jokes, specifically the Cartman and Totoro bits, but this episode was not as good in my opinion. The jokes weren't as funny, it fell a little flat, but it's still good, and it's getting a 6 out of 10. Episode 4. This episode was incredible. I loved the Saudi Arabia jokes. That was fucking hilarious. I mean, everything about this episode was funny. It was just a good episode from start to finish. And once again, I'm granting it an 8 out of 10. Episode 5. Okay, I really, really, really love the part where the baby kills itself. That's like a top 5 joke out of both of the recent seasons. Possibly a top 5 joke out of the last fucking 5 seasons. I'm just throwing the number out there. I don't know how this joke holds up compared to South Park's history, but for me, this is a really fucking funny joke. But this episode as a whole just kind of felt rushed. And I know that all of South Park's episodes are kind of rushed. That's the formula. It's a fundamental part of South Park. But I mean, something about this episode specifically just felt like it was done with a lot less care. And because of that, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. And this season ends up being a 7 out of 10. And this brings the year score to a 6.09 out of 10.
Keep on running. Keep on hiding. One fine day I got.
So I thought this movie had a real tug-of-war quality. Like, it was really good, then it was bad, then it was good again, and then it was bad again. And it just, like, kept fluctuating between being a good movie and a bad movie. In the beginning, the character was kind of, like, not believable, you know? He's like a hothead, he's impulsive. I think in this dystopian world that we're seeing, a character like that wouldn't last very long. without getting thrown in prison. But then, the movie starts picking up in quality. My favorite part of the whole movie is Michael Cera's scene. That was fucking fantastic, phenomenal. Quality goes back down. That last girl, she kind of changes her whole worldview super fucking quickly. And that once again just breaks the believability of it all. So again, real tug-of-war quality. It's almost equal parts good and bad, although I think the good in this movie is more good than the bad in this movie is bad. And while I would consider this to be my least favorite Edgar Wright film, it's still good. And that just goes to show how good of a director Edgar Wright is. So the movie itself ends up being a 6 out of 10. The year score remains at a 6.09 out of 10. So of course I decided to celebrate the holiday season with a holiday movie, and this movie was really fucking funny. Now, I'm not a Seth Rogen guy. I'm not like a huge Seth Rogen fan, but his performance in this was absolutely incredible. And this movie isn't some like deep existential movie that's gonna make you cry, but as far as comedy goes, it's done so fucking well. It is a really funny movie. Move over, fat man. The Night Before is now my third favorite Christmas movie, and it's getting an 8 out of 10, and this puts the year at a 6.12 out of 10. I think I've gotten fatter. And that, my friends, was the last movie I watched this year. So the year score will be remaining at a 6.12 out of 10, and rounded down to a 6 out of 10. So that is the final score. Yippee! And I kind of realized about halfway through this video that it was almost inevitable that the year score would end up somewhere between 5 and 7, because unless I was consistently watching great movies or shit movies, it was just gonna average out. So yeah, this video is kind of fucking pointless. But by the time I realized that, I had already dumped a lot of time and effort into making it, so I just decided to keep going. So it's safe to say I won't be doing this again. In fact, I actually avoided watching movies on my watch list just because I didn't want to create the work for myself. And of course that sucks, because the whole reason I'm making these videos to begin with is because I love watching movies. But an interesting observation that I made while making this video is all year, I have not, for the first time, got to experience a 10 out of 10 movie, nor was I subjected to a 1 out of 10 movie. This year, I did not hit bedrock. I did not reach peak. I was not tortured in the depths of hell. Yet I had not ascended to the heavens. So even though it was gonna probably be averaged out no matter what, I think in regards to my personal movie watching experience, 2025 feels like a 6 out of 10. So I think the score is actually kind of appropriate. Anyway, here is all 59 pieces of media that I covered in this video, ranked from worst to best. So this is obviously all subject to change if I happen to rewatch it, so it's not like this ranking is set in stone. So coming in at 59, the movie that was rated the lowest and the only 2 out of 10, another gay movie. I swear it's not because I'm homophobic, this is just a really bad movie. And then we move into the 3 out of 10s. At number 58, Night of the Living Cat, and I'm not gonna watch that again. At number 57 is Alice Sweet Alice. At 56 is Hook. Then we get into our 4 out of 10s. At number 55, Love Hurts, but not as much as watching this movie does. At number 54, Totally Killer. Number 53, What About Bob? What about making a good movie? At number 52, Finding Forrester. How about finding it within yourself to make a good movie? At number 51 is Tokyo Ghoul Season 2. At number 50 is Five Nights at Freddy's 2. And then we get into our 5 out of 10s. At number 49 is The Walking Dead Season 8. I would say this show died with Carl, but it actually died a lot sooner than that. I mean, at this point, the show is adequately named because it is The Walking Dead, a corpse of its former self. At number 48 is Castlevania Nocturne Season 1. It's just boring. At 47 is King Corn. The fact that a documentary about corn is higher than Castlevania Nocturne Season 1 just goes to show how boring Nocturne Season 1 is. At number 46 is Tokyo Ghoul Season 1. At least it's not Tokyo Ghoul Season 2. At number 45 is Until Dawn. At number 44 is Attack on Titan Season 2. At number 43 is Castlevania Nocturne Season 2. Thank you, Alucard. At 42 is Dragula Season 1. At 41 is Black Phone 2. At number 40 is This Is the Tom Green Documentary. 39 is Good Boy. Number 38 is Dragula Season 5. And at 37 is Junji Ito Maniac. And then we get into our 6 out of 10s. At 36 is Airplane. At 35 is I'm Still Here. At 34 is Superman. 33, Nosferatu. 32, Happy Gilmore. It was a good time. 31, AP Bio Season 1. It was a better time. At number 30 is Junji Ito Collection. At 29 is Attack on Titan Season 1. And at 28 is Running Man. Of course, Edgar Wright's worst movie dominates all the other 6 out of 10s. And then we get to our 7 out of 10s. At 27 is South Park Season 27. That's pretty cool. The stars kind of aligned here, huh? At 26 is Mickey 17. That one doesn't work as well. At 25 is gonna be Rick and Morty Season 8. At 24, Companion. Mostly because I didn't see the trailer. At 23 is Princess Mononoke. At 22 is South Park Season 28. At 21 is I Think You Should Leave Season 3. At 20 is Kiss of the Spider-Woman. At 19 is gonna be Squid Game Season 3. And at 18 is gonna be Attack on Titan Season 3. I love giving Season 3s 7 out of 10s. And then we get into our 8 out of 10s. At number 17 is The Monkey. At 16 is Before I Wake. At 15 is Bottoms. See, I told you I wasn't homophobic. Coming in at number 14, a Minecraft movie. My nostalgia and bias towards Minecraft is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. At 13 is The Night Before. At 12 is Heart Eyes. At 11 is Wicked for Good. And then we get to our top 10. At number 10 is Whiplash. Number 9 is Sinners. Number 8 is Invincible Season 1. At number 7 is Smiling Friends Season 3. At 6 is The Life of Chuck. And then we get to our top 5. At number 5 is Harold and Maude. At number 4 is Friendship. At number 3 is Attack on Titan Season 4. I'll tell you, at the start of the year, I did not think an anime would make it to my top 3. So obviously I've grown as a person. At number 2 is I Like Movies, if you couldn't tell. And at number 1, the only 9 out of 10 I gave is Squid Game Season 2. Alright, and that is all I have for you guys. So let's have a good 2026.